It's between 9.50 and 12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Give me a ring.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's Friday, ladies and gentlemen. We've reached the end of yet another extraordinary week in the dangerous world of international politics, and we've got an awful lot to do. It's, of course, Friday the 13th as well, which is, for some people, a very suspicious date. Hopefully, it won't be. There's been plenty of things to talk about. Don't forget the Morning Glory podcast that you can get every single weekday after this show finishes. It's around about 10:15. We've got a special guest this morning. Deanna Davidson is here, former Tory MP. Welcome. Nice to see you, Deanna. Back from foreign parts. We'll talk about that. Coming up in a little while. We've got some breaking news for you overnight. It looks as though Iran has been hit with some airstrikes by Israel in the last few hours. We've still got that story developing. We'll be talking to somebody in Israel about that coming up in about 10 or 15 minutes. Also, of course, the papers this morning very much full of what is one of the most horrific and ghastly plane crashes I think anybody has ever seen. More than 240 people on board a Boeing Dreamliner bound for Gatwick Airport in Britain were killed in an Indian air crash over Ahmedabad Airport when they simply couldn't get the plane in the air. Nobody knows how it could have happened. There's some suggestion that Boeing may have to do a massive investigation into exactly what is wrong with this particular plane, if in fact it is that fault, whether there was pilot error, whether there was some kind of terrorist attack, nobody really knows. But one man, Kumar Ramesh, was the only person to survive, incredibly, sitting in seat 11A. We'll talk to you about all of that. Plus, of course, the usual row-round of what's going on inside the government. Keir Starmer being accused of lying once again because of course he came out with a tweet yesterday in which he said basically that the money they saved from the VAT on schools, money they got from that, has gone into building houses, which is not what it was supposed to be for. Also, Rachel Reeves has been accused of making up numbers by the Institute of Fiscal Studies, so we'll get into that as well. Spain can now stop British people entering Gibraltar. We've got Kemi Badenoch making a speech yesterday slamming the welfare state, saying, you know, the country should not be mummy and daddy. And Simon Cowell has called for a ban on homework. He says that basically no child should have to do homework. It's too stressful, it's too difficult, let's just stop it altogether. 0344 499 1000 is the number. It's 5 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. So, we've made it to yet another Friday. Deanna Davidson's here. Very good morning to you, Deanna.
Morning, nice to see you.
Very nice to see you. Just back in from Brazil, where you now live.
Yes.
What's it like to be back in England?
I'm back in the best country in the world.
Well,
you know?
listen, you can say that when you don't live here, can't you? Because we live here and we look around and we go, crikey, what is going on? How bad is this government? What are they doing to it? You know, why has everything gone to mush? But when you come back, you kind of see it differently.
Yeah, it gives you a good sense of perspective, I think. you know, I'm literally on a different hemisphere, so something I never expected to say.
Right.
And I absolutely love Brazil. It's a wonderful country to live in. Everyone's so welcoming and kind and friendly.
Right.
But there is something nice about being home. And it's funny the things that you miss. It's not the stuff you'd expect. It's snacks.
Right.
It's always snacks. I want my Monster Munch and I can't get them overseas, and that is devastating for someone like me.
I mean, when I lived in America, it was things like chocolate and crisps and that kind of thing. Yeah, so so you're back for a little while? You're on business, just seeing people?
A couple of weeks, bit of work, bit of play, as is the way. It's nice. As I say, nice to be home. And it does make you appreciate the important stuff as well.
Yeah, and have you been following the sort of political ramifications on and off that have been going on over the past...
It's hard not to, and I've tried to really detach myself from politics as much as possible since leaving Parliament last year, and turned off a lot of different notifications on news apps and things just to try and get a bit of separation. But it is so hard. I think once a political bug has got you, it's really difficult to let go of it.
Yeah, I think that's true. Obviously, we're going to talk about the Keir Starmer situation, the Rachel Reeves situation. Kemi Badenoch made a great speech yesterday. And we're going to bring you the latest from Israel very, very shortly. But I guess we should start with the front pages of the papers today. The miracle of seat 11A is what they're calling it. It really, I mean, everybody, I mean, you've only just got off a plane yourself. I mean, anyone who's ever been on a plane, it's just your worst nightmare. I mean, I don't know about you, but I try not to think about things like this when I'm flying, because you never get on a plane, would you?
Absolutely, and I've got a few friends who have really severe flying anxiety. I've flown with them, and stuff like this must be horrendous. But I think the kind of miracle but saddest part is this guy who survived. I don't know how you live with that. I don't know how you live being the only survivor in something like this, where most likely friends and family who were on there were potentially, you know, unfortunately killed in this accident. An absolute miracle, definitely.
It really is.
But I think a lot of people in that scenario would be asking, why me? Why was I the one to make it? Which must be just, I don't know how you live with it.
What we seem to think happened is that the plane took off. I mean, there's some very good graphics and things in the papers this morning. In the Mail, they've got a graphic where it says the Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner plane bound for London Gatwick was taxiing at 1:38. It took off, went into the air, and you've all been in that situation. You're just kind of looking out the window, or you're figuring whatever it is out, and suddenly it just didn't get above 600 feet. I think 450, 500 feet, and they just lost power somehow.
There was clearly some catastrophic failure here, and whether that was a technical failure or, you know, human error, we're kind of yet to find out. But just what must have been going through the minds of those people, where, you know, you're excited to go on holiday, see your family, like whatever it might be, that kind of anticipation and anxiety as soon as the plane takes off, to turn into something like this within seconds is really devastating. And I think the bit that's sort of a little bit missed as well is the plane crashed into a building and more people in that building were killed.
Well, I
think they were medical students as well.
That's right. I mean, it says possibly a technical failure or perhaps a flock of birds sucked into both engines. According to the lone survivor, Kumar Ramesh, he heard a loud noise just after takeoff. I don't know what that could be. The plane rapidly lost speed and height, triggered cacophony of cockpit alarms, landing gear still down, pilots preparing for a desperate emergency landing, and then they seem to come down, as you say, on top of like a hostel of some kind. And that's what they're saying, that after escaping the remains of the aircraft, wedged into an upper story, he would have had to navigate down several floors of the burning building, and through streets strewn with charred bodies and scorched. I mean, it's just an incredible story, isn't it?
Absolutely devastating. Devastating. I think it said there were people trying to jump out of the building to escape the flames as well, which, yeah, I think the thing that I found really surprising yesterday, and I don't know if you caught this, was there was a journalist who actually released the manifest list before anything had been formally confirmed. And there were questions about journalistic ethics and whether that was the appropriate thing to do before families had been informed and things, which I just found a little bit surprising.
I think it's probably not something I would have done.
No.
I don't think you should. I mean, it's very, very difficult, because obviously there are quotes from family members of some of the people on the plane in the papers today, and they're all obviously still in shock. You know, and you don't. I mean, I used to hate those kinds of jobs where you'd have to go and talk to families of people who had something terrible happen to their relatives. Let's have a look at Keir Starmer on the crash. He spoke about it yesterday.
Well, the images and news from India is absolutely devastating, and I speak for the entire country in saying our thoughts are with each and every one of those involved. There will be British and Indian families across the land who are absolutely impacted by this, and our thoughts first and foremost are with them. Obviously the investigation is going on. We've dispatched an investigation team that's been deployed. The Foreign Secretary is leading on this, and we'll obviously update as soon as we can. But we're working with the Indian authorities on this to establish the facts. I would say to all families, friends of anybody affected to please contact the Foreign Office for further information.
And it looks as though, I mean, lots of people have got things to say. The Mail's quoting Marco Chan of Buckinghamshire New University in High Wycombe. He said the flaps on the wings didn't look as if they were in the right position. Speculation the plane was not correctly set up for takeoff.
Right.
Which would obviously be a horrendous, human error if that was true. Were the pilots to blame? Highly unlikely, according to experts. Captain Sumit Sabharwal and co-pilot Clive Kundar were very experienced, and even if a mistake was made with the flaps, they could quickly have rectified it. They say investigators obviously looking for the black box.
This is a relatively new aircraft, though, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, I think it came out in 2011, the Dreamliner. I remember to great fanfare at the time. So relatively new technology, which you would think would be incredibly reliable. Older planes, you might appreciate there could be, more technical faults, but something so modern.
There's been a lot of stories recently about Boeing, though, hasn't there? About the fact that they've had problems with lots of different planes. They've had lots of problems with production. I mean, remember President Trump when he was going to take delivery of that free plane from Qatar? He said, well, there's a new Air Force One being built, but it's being built by Boeing, and they're taking such a long time, it will never be ready. And they've had all sorts of problems with, accusations about, hiring people who couldn't do jobs properly because of DEI and all of that kind of thing. It's just such a tragedy. I mean, it's hard to believe because we don't really see. I mean, I remember when I worked in America in the 80s, there were quite a lot of plane crashes, and you'd seem to be covering one every few months, but we don't really have them anymore.
Whereas in recent months, it feels like there have been an awful lot of air accidents. Over the past sort of 6 months, a year, and it's curious, really.
It really is, and it just it makes you wonder. He was coming back. The miracle of the flight. He was coming back to get to live in. He lives in Leicester, apparently. When I got up, there were bodies all around me. It's amazing that not only has he survived, but they've actually got quotes from him.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely extraordinary.
And I think there was 53 British nationals on board. So, I mean, the fallout's going to be felt at home by so many families.
Well, the Sun is calling it the worst British crash toll since 9/11.
Wow.
Aviation disaster, the biggest in years. Absolutely extraordinary. Boeing boss Kelly Ortberg says our deepest condolences go out to the loved ones of everyone on board. Presumably they'll have to ground all of these planes, won't they, the Dreamliners, until they find out what happened.
Which in itself will be, devastating for international air transit as well, because they're quite a big fleet.
Right. And that's, again, one of those things that people will now be looking to see what plane they're getting on.
Yes.
Let's talk about the airstrikes on Iran overnight. We've got a statement, I think, from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival.
Let's talk to Jonathan Conricus now, a former IDF spokesperson, and see what he's got to say. Jonathan, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed. We sort of had a slight heads up on this, I suppose, because of the way that the news came through yesterday, I think it was, that American embassy staff had been asked to evacuate certain embassies, certainly in Baghdad and certainly in, I think, Bahrain and Kuwait as well. What's the reason that I know Benjamin Netanyahu explained that Iran have been doing things that they've never done before, but why now?
One reason could be that 60 days or 61 days have transpired since President Trump started negotiations, and he gave that window, and perhaps the time has run out, and perhaps Trump and his team have understood that the Iranians were never intending to reach a deal, and they were never intending not to enrich material in Iran, and that they were indeed sprinting to develop a nuclear bomb. And just as Israel has been saying all along, time ran out, and Iran ran out of runway, and that's what we're seeing now.
And so, is this likely to be a one-night event, or is it going to be more to come?
I don't think it's going to be a one-night or one-day event. I think we have a few days at least ahead of us. As the saying goes, the enemy has a vote, and the enemy currently has fired about 100 drones towards Israel. We understand that to be the first Iranian retaliation. Israel is gearing up to intercept them and defend itself, and simultaneously conducting additional or preparing to conduct additional strikes over Iran to take out additional capabilities of the Iranian regime. So I think it's a very dynamic situation, definitely not short. And I don't think I would be saying too much if I would say that there's a significant risk for the regime itself here, and that any decision that it takes in terms of whether they will decide to attack Americans or only Israel, and how hard they will try to attack Israel, that will probably have a lot of effect on the future of the regime in Iran.
And because of the way that the information, I guess, was communicated to American embassy staff, would that suggest to you that Benjamin Netanyahu had shared his plans with Donald Trump?
100%. I mean, we don't need suggestions. That is has been said and confirmed by the highest echelons in Israel and the US. The plans were shared ahead of time. Advance notice was given. Nobody on the other side of the Atlantic was surprised, and President Trump has said that himself. And I'll take that one step further. I think it's fair to assume that Israel and the US were deeply and intimately coordinated, and that the last statements during the last days, President Trump and his team and the negotiations, etc., were perhaps part of a plan to lure the Iranians into a false sense of security. I cannot imagine senior Iranian leaders, their chief of staff, the commander of the vaunted IRGC, and other senior Iranian military and nuclear officials, all in their homes, in their beds, unawares, and being caught by surprise, had it not been for a false sense of security that obviously was instilled.
And is Israel pretty secure in its belief that the air defense systems will work? Because, I mean, obviously Iran has fired missiles on Israel before, and sometimes they've fired some quite heavy ballistic missiles as well, haven't they?
Yes, you're right in that, and unfortunately some of those missiles also struck down in Israel and caused significant damage. What I think is different today is that Israel learned a few lessons from October 24, when Iran last attacked Israel with a few hundred ballistic missiles. By the way, the largest ballistic missile attack in history. And Israel, I think part of the targets that have been struck in Iran already are ballistic missile sites and launch sites. And I think Israel is, of course, thinking ahead and maybe playing the old Iranian game of chess with the Iranians on the battlefield and seeking to take out Iranian capabilities of countermeasures before they're able to use them. But time will tell. Israel has strong and advanced air defenses, but the best way of protecting yourself is making sure that your enemy never fires anything at you. And we'll have to see how successful Israel is in that.
Yes. And so you would expect, as you said earlier, this not to be a one-night event or a one-day event. It could go on for the whole weekend, maybe into next week?
I think that's a conservative assessment, yes.
OK. So we could be in for the long haul, in other words.
We could, and I hope Israelis will be safe, and I hope that the outcome for Israel and for the region and for the Iranian people will be a positive one.
Yes, I think we would all hope that. An Israeli military spokesman said Iran has launched more than 100 drones towards Israel in the last few hours after the country vowed retaliation for Israeli strikes. The spokesperson said 200 Israeli fighter jets took part in the strikes on more than 100 targets in Iran. overnight. So, Jonathan, thank you very much indeed for talking to us, and we appreciate it very much. Former IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus there. So, Deanna Davidson's with me here this morning. It looks like we're going to have another kind of fairly long-term war going on in the Middle East.
Certainly sounds like it. I mean, Netanyahu, he's a power player, so it's not surprising that he would want to take some action based on the findings from the International Atomic Energy Agency this week. The level of escalation, I think, is a thing that's concerning because, you know, understandably, Iran have already responded, so we're going to see Iranian lives at risk, Iranian civilian lives at risk, Israeli civilian lives at risk now, which I think is the bit that often gets missed in the kind of power play of foreign policy are the civilians who are affected.
They do have incredible defences, though, don't they, the Israelis?
Absolutely.
Because I think that's when, I can't remember when it was. I think it was last year when Iran sent hundreds and hundreds of like drones and ballistic missiles in, and only a handful of them got through.
But it's not just the civilian losses, though. It's the complete mindset and change of life. The fact that there have been air raids going on, air raid sirens, people having to go into shelters, and just that constant state of vigilance must be an incredibly difficult thing to live with. But the Israeli people I know are incredibly resilient.
They are.
I think the danger is where it goes from here, as is always the case when there's escalation in these sorts of conflicts, but particularly escalation with a country that we know has a lot of nuclear material, and I think the findings from the I always get it wrong, the Atomic Energy Agency found that there was enough enriched uranium, which is, you know, sort of developed in a way that could potentially make up to 9 nuclear weapons, which is serious. Is serious, and understandably, as a neighbour and adversary, that could feel like a very serious threat. I don't think we've yet heard anything from UK sources, from the UK Foreign Office or Prime Minister or the Foreign Secretary.
I've just got a Prime Minister's statement here, actually. It literally just came in, breaking news now. The reports of these strikes are concerning, and we urge all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. Escalation serves no one in the region. Stability in the Middle East must be the priority, and we are engaging partners to de-escalate. Now is the time for restraint, calm, and a return to diplomacy. Well, I mean, that's not going to have any effect on Benjamin Netanyahu, is it?
No, I suspect not. And this is, you know, very much in line with a lot of our Western allies saying the same thing. Escalation is the last thing that's needed right now. And I do agree with that. But again, when you're playing with a huge power player like a Netanyahu, who probably does legitimately feel that his nation, his people are at threat.
Yeah, I'm sure with good reason, to be honest. I mean, when you've got a country like Iran, which has sworn to wipe them off the map, and they've got nuclear capability, the only best form of defence is attack, isn't it? I think.
I wouldn't claim to know, Mike. You know, I'm fortunately never been in that position, and living in Britain, home of democracy and freedom, we are very fortunate as a people to not have to imminently day to day deal with such threats ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely right. We'll bring you more on this story as it develops. Obviously, it's going to be something that carries on for some time, for the morning of Friday this morning, but also into Saturday, into Sunday, and obviously into next week as well. So very concerning time. It's 23 minutes past 6. We'll be back right after this.
this runway that the plane took off from maybe rather too short. Is that a possible explanation for what went wrong here?
Indeed. I tracked the ground radar information, which has not yet been confirmed by the Indian authorities, and clearly shows the aircraft entering the runway at an intersection and initiating its takeoff roll right from there instead of backtracking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 27 minutes past 6. It is, of course, Friday the 13th, and there's plenty of bad things going on just to go along with that particular date, if you have to think about it. But we're going to talk about the political world now. Jen Davison, you were once part of it all, going into Parliament every day, having to listen to them every day, which probably wasn't as bad then as it is now, because now we have to listen to the kind of, you know, automatons.
That was very good.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Well, Keir Starmer actually was speaking the other day, and I said he now sounds like he's doing an impersonation of me, doing an impersonation of him. You know, it's kind of gone round full circle, you know. But he's been accused of lying because he put out a tweet the other day in which he said that basically, you know, because we took VAT from the private schools and we charged it, we took that money and now we're able to use it to build houses. And you can see the tweet up there. And basically that's entirely not what the whole business of VAT for schools was supposed to do. It was supposed to provide 6,500 teachers in the state school system, and it was supposed to be an aid to you know, state schools and ordinary working people's children. Yes. And it was supposed to punish, you know, sort of toffs children, and that was what it was for. Now suddenly he says it's for building houses.
Well, not only does it go against the line that they use, which was, you know, we're going to charge the, in inverted commas, rich families' kids so that the poorer families' kids can have better facilities and better standards. So it was all about schools. They never said ring fence, but the idea was that it was effectively ring fence money. So not only is his tweet saying that this is for housing inaccurate, am I not right in thinking that actually the savings from this are so minimal now?
They are.
That it's completely negligible.
Right.
Completely
and also
negligible.
6,000, we said at the time, 6,500 teachers is not even one teacher for every school.
No, precisely.
And they probably haven't even hired that many teachers anyway since then. And also, the number of kids who came out of private school as a result of it was estimated by Labour to be 3,000. It turned out to be 11,000.
So far.
So far. So actually, and schools are still closing as well. And so the knock-on effect to some parts of the country has been tremendously bad, because a lot of people, I think in Surrey alone, they found that there weren't any places for the kids that came out of private schools, so they had to like bus them or put them in taxis and take them outside of the county to be educated.
Absolutely. The thought that they're spending literally thousands per month on taxis for individual students just because there are no school places within the county is not only mad in terms of public finances, but for that poor kid having to get a taxi on their own every morning to be shipped out of the county to go to a school where none of their mates go.
So you go to a school where nobody knows them,
Absolutely.
Terrible.
Must be devastating.
Right. Well, just to prove that you got it wrong, here's Rachel Reeves actually on the day, in the spending review, talking about what the VAT was for.
That is why at the budget last autumn, I ended the tax loophole which exempted private schools from VAT and business rates. And I put that money where it belongs, into helping the 93% of children in our state schools.
And there's Bridget Phillipson with the evil smile.
So where has the money gone?
So she says it's gone to schools. He says it's gone into building houses. You can't use it twice.
No.
Right?
Well, Labour try to. They're not very good at sums.
Well, they're not very good at sums. She's terrible at sums. In fact, you know, when we were saying that they put somebody in charge of the RAF the other day who can't fly a plane, they said, well, don't worry, we've got a chancellor that can't use a calculator, can't actually add up. And how about this from Alan in Middlesbrough? I put a new TV on today's shopping list after throwing my boot at Darren Jones on Question Time last night when telling us that the vast majority of illegal migrants crossing the Channel are women and children. Peter Hitchens was spot on yesterday. This extreme gaslighting is about control and power. Peter Hitchens yesterday was on the show, told us that, you know when propaganda is being used against you because they're using it to show how powerful and controlling they are, because they know they're not telling the truth. And we know they're not telling the truth, so why are they doing it?
I think especially for the likes of Keir Starmer, whose entire supposed USP was that after the last government, he is the man of integrity. He's the man who'll be honest with the British people. He's the man who'll talk about what the real challenges are and, have integrity at the heart of his government.
Right. It was a government of service, do you remember?
Absolutely, government of service. This just really undermines his credibility and the credibility of his entire government.
Right.
I think it's fine, if politicians mislead often. I'm not saying it's the right thing at all, but statistics are used in various ways to make your case. Of course they are. But you cannot have it both ways. You can't do that and use those tactics and then claim to be Mr. Integrity.
That's, I think, what people don't like.
The hypocrisy, I think, is frustrating for a lot of people.
It is, because a lot of people say to me, certainly, when I'm critical of them, well, were you that critical of the Conservative government when they were in? And actually,
You
I was.
actually were.
I actually was.
I remember.
But also, it's the fact that these people said they would be different. Labour made a big deal about the fact that it was government of service, that there would be no, shortcuts, that there would be no sleaze. And, of course, the first thing we found out when they got in was that Lord Ali had been providing all of them with clothes and spectacles and flats and holidays and God knows what else, Free tickets for Taylor Swift, free tickets for all sorts of things that ordinary people couldn't afford to go to. So,
it's such a shame. You can't promise change and then do exactly the same or even worse, because all it does is undermine your credibility.
Exactly. Which
I actually think is a really big challenge we have in kind of politics and belief in a political system at the moment. So many people feel so painfully disenfranchised. And how can you regain that credibility if you yourself keep chipping away at it? There is a reason turnouts in elections are getting lower and lower.
And
people don't believe in politicians.
And there's a reason people are going to Reform, because they see Reform as a different party. They see them, regardless of whatever their policies are, they see them as real people. Whether that's right or wrong is up to them. We've got Darren Jones, I think, on that clip from Newsnight. Let's have a look.
You're going to build new homes for asylum seekers?
No. So there are two things here. One is the total number of people waiting for a decision. That number is coming down significantly already. We've got further to go. Where people are granted asylum to stay in the UK, then it's right that we offer them supported housing to begin with, but then ultimately they've got to get a job and they've got to pay private rent in the rental market in the same way everyone else does. What we're not doing is paying hotels a nightly fee for a hotel room.
No, I understand that. Instead, you are going to build hostels, aren't you?
Well, we're putting capital investment into government-owned facilities instead of hotels for the temporary time when you're waiting for a decision, because it's cheaper to do that. And then ultimately, people who are granted the right to stay then are integrated into our communities in a normal way.
But are you going to spend money on new government facilities to house asylum seekers?
We'll be upgrading current facilities, which will include some extensions, but that will be whilst their decision is being made and is different to just paying a hotel for a hotel room. It's cheaper to do it that way.
So they say they're not going to have hotel rooms for them anymore, but they're going to spend just as much money providing them with private housing, aren't they?
I mean, Darren is very good. He is the sort of person Labour need to send out and defend some difficult lines, and I think he's very good at it. But even then, I was watching that interview. I was watching that interview. Just say yes. You've literally said you're going to spend capital funding on new facilities. So just say yes, answer the question, say yes.
That's the other thing that annoys people, that the politicians now don't answer questions. They'll sometimes answer a question that you didn't ask them, but they'll never answer the question that you did ask them. They just seem to be ridiculously hopeless at that. But coming up, we're looking at Britain's broken borders, because, of course, that is part of the Sun's campaign, and they've got a piece in the paper this morning saying, where's our 480 million quid gone? It's a pretty good question. We'll be back with Deanna Davison after this. Let's get a voice note from Dave.
Mark, it's David Manchester. You've just played a clip. I speak for all the UK, Keir Starmer. He doesn't speak for me. He doesn't represent me. He can't speak for me. He's not what I want to say. So he doesn't speak for the UK, but he uses that term very, very glibly. Have a good day, mate.
He does, Dave, quite right. He says it all the time. I speak for the entire country. Well, maybe you don't, actually. So stop saying that you do. Back after this with Deanna Davison.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:37. It is Friday the 13th, and we've got an awful lot of things to do this morning. Tony says this: hello, Israeli and American bases in the Middle East face obliteration. Foolish mistake. Well, I don't know about that, Tony. I mean, I know that Israel certainly have got some pretty good defences, and I'm sure some of the Americans will not be encouraging Iran to do anything like that. Let's get a voice note from James on Starmer.
Good morning, Mike. Now, Mike, the great Keir Starmer went to my hometown's college, Suffolk New College, and my friend works in there, and he actually met the great Starmer. And I'll tell you what, Mike, he said he was like a bloody a Dalek that's just gone on standby. He said, "Oh, good morning, Mr. Prime Minister," and Starmer was like, "Good morning." I'll tell you what, Mike, how on earth is this man in charge? It's like some sort of dream, Mike. He is like a bloody Dalek. Farage, 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 Farage. Good God, give me strength, Mike. Anyway, have a lovely weekend, Mike.
Thank you, James. This is how people think. This is how people see him. We get this every single day on this show, that the ordinary people of this country, the people who vote, some of them may have even voted for Labour, had no idea they'd be this bad.
I'll never forget
that's a surprise, really, isn't it?
I think it is for a lot of people. I'll never forget your Christmas lights countdown where you turn it into the Thunderbirds.
Yes.
That was iconic. It's you never want to be mocked as a politician.
No.
Maybe mocked for a gaffe or something. That's one thing. But to be mocked for your entire personality by the public, and obviously the chant we saw at the sport, was it football?
Yeah, it was a football match. Yeah.
Was not ideal. Being called a four-letter word by thousands of people at a football match in your first year in office.
Right. And he got it as well just in the first month that he was in office because of all of the things that they did. I remember he went to Doncaster races and people were sort of shouting abuse at him, and sort of everywhere you go. And I mean, I know that, and you can't encourage people to do that, but you can't stop them from doing it really either. You know, it's a spontaneous act.
And I mean, you know.
Did you ever have many dealings with him at all when you were in Parliament?
So this is a story that I try not to tell it too often, but I don't believe I ever spoke to him. And I am chatty. I'll talk to anyone in a lift going down the corridor or whatever. And, you know, obviously brush shoulders with a lot of people. So Jeremy Corbyn I always found really charming, even though politically we couldn't be further apart on almost every issue. Starmer, I was always really disappointed with. And you get the measure of a man quite quickly based on his manners and general subtle interactions, right? It tells you an awful lot about a person and their character. Keir Starmer was one of the only politicians where I would be walking ahead of him, hold the door open, and he would never say thank you, he wouldn't make eye contact, he wouldn't smile. His entire entourage had passed through, and there wouldn't even be any kind of...
And none of them would
thanks.
say it.
No, some of the entourage would sort of smile or nod or whatever. And I get it, I'm a different party. But in that place, we were all elected members of Parliament. And regardless, even if it was a staff or a cleaner or whatever, you say thank you if someone holds the door open for you.
Absolutely.
And if this had happened once, I would have thought, OK, they're in a rush, they're doing important business, whatever. Multiple times this happened, and I just thought, no, that's
just awful, isn't it?
That's not my kind of person.
Very good indicator. You're right.
It's
very
not
good
my
indicator
kind of person.
And if particularly if he's doing it because you're a Tory, that's even worse. But that's the thing. You get the sense from this government that they want to punish the Tories. They want to punish anybody who voted Tory.
But everything was our fault.
Everything
in the entire world was the Tories' fault, with our £22 billion black hole, which, you know, another figure that's misleading.
Doesn't exist.
Absolutely. I get it. You know, you blame your predecessors. We did the same in 2010 when we came. We blamed Gordon Brown and Tony Blair for every woe the country had ever had. But I think the public see through that as well. They don't want to hear opposition bashing. They want to hear hope and a vision and optimism about what is to come. And I don't think we're getting that actually from any of the main parties, particularly at the moment.
No, it's very tricky, isn't it? Let's have a look at what's on page 19 of the Sun, because following on from that Darren Jones thing about what's going to happen with the asylum seekers and the illegal migrants, a big picture of, funnily enough, a dinghy full of men. Britain's broken borders is what we're calling it here. And the Sun have got a story on this pretty much every day. I'm struggling to see the women and children on that dinghy. Do you see any? No, I don't think
my
so.
eyesight's not... I think I can see one lady at the front, potentially.
No. Don't know. Possibly somebody pretending to be a woman, I don't know. But they're basically saying the French cops are getting worse because, again, this was another one of Starmer's claims. 2 weeks ago, he started saying, the French are going to change the way they operate. They're going to start going into the water. They're going to start arresting the people who are trying to get onto dinghies and detain them. And of course, we found out, the Sun found out in the story yesterday, that's precisely not what they're doing, because they've actually said, we won't go into the water, it's too dangerous, we're not doing that. So that was another, misleading claim.
Well, that was part of the agreement. I mean, we paid the French, I think, 480 million.
480 million,
So
the piece says, where's it gone?
This isn't a small sum at all. And, if there is genuinely strong action to stop the boats from the French end, that would be ideal, and that's what this agreement was all about. And yeah, I think it said that since 2024, since May 2024, there have only been 2 months where French border patrols have stopped more boats and have actually ended up arriving in Britain. I don't envy them. The smugglers are sophisticated. I mean, they know what they're doing and how to evade border patrols. They're good at what they do for a reason, and unfortunately that affects us. But even so, it does feel as though we've been taken a little bit for mugs on this one. It really
does. And just to add insult to injury, funnily enough, at the bottom of the page there, the Sun have just got a report on the piece, an interview that we did yesterday with Zia Youssef from Reform, in which he was talking about, the things they're discovering in Kent County Council as they go in and try and uncover what the waste has been. And apparently, one of the things that's been going on is that they've been taking asylum seekers to things like trampolining lessons and, football matches and, giving them, taking them to places that ordinary people can't afford to go, which is really wrong, isn't it?
I mean, I can understand the point about integration for those asylum seekers who are genuine asylum seekers who do want to try and integrate into British society. I get that. But
that's not what we see, though,
when you have regular families, as you say, struggling to afford such things for their own children, and also, in some of the councils down there in Kent, you have Kent County Council and other surrounds, you have, kids in care really struggling, and really struggling with placements for kids in care and whatnot. It's really difficult, and it's not difficult. It's impossible to defend, isn't it? Really impossible to defend.
This is the problem. The problem for most people, I mean, this whole argument started off years and years ago, and everyone said, don't worry, it's a very small number of people that are coming. But now, the numbers who have come illegally by boats is something like 150,000, which is a large town or city in this country. And many of them seem to be getting preferential treatment ahead of people from this country, and that's what's really annoying people.
People don't want to feel that they're at the back of the queue. If they're good, law-abiding, hard-working people, tax-paying, just trying to do their best to raise a family and create a better life for their kids than the one that they had. They need to be given every advantage and every opportunity. So to feel like you're at the back of the queue, it's no wonder people feel disillusioned with not just politicians, but just with society in general.
Yeah, absolutely right. We're going to come back in a moment because we've got much more to talk about. How about this from Jules in Camden? Morning, Mike. Great to see Dana again. I used to love her Sunday slot on a rival broadcaster. Brazil's gain is our loss. It is true. Starmer may as well keep quiet, says Shaw. The UK, with its vile Labour government, is the last country Netanyahu will pay any attention to, and rightly so. Well, that is the problem. Yeah, coming up, we're going to tell you how the police are now claiming they haven't got enough money, so they're not going to be able to do their jobs properly, and they're going to have to go soft on crime. Well, they already have, haven't they? 6:45.
I'm at the post-mortem room. I will show you the current situation of the post-mortem room. You can see all relatives of the survivors, or they all are here since morning, and everybody is looking for the relatives. Particularly if we talk about the flight, it was Indian Airlines, and 242 passengers were on board, and this is the current situation is at the post-mortem room.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. The breaking news overnight is that there has been military strikes taking place in Iran. Israel has launched over 100 military strikes on specific targets, notably missile sites and various other things inside of Iran. Iran has also retaliated. We'll bring you more on that as the story develops. 100 drones have been fired towards Israel in the last few hours after the country vowed retaliation for Israel's strikes overnight. More on that coming up. Front page of the Times, Deanna Davidson's here with us, former Tory MP, of course. Police claim funding shortfall will force them to go soft on theft. I think everyone will just shake their heads at this one, won't they? Because they've been going soft on theft for a very long time.
It's when you see reports of people whose phone's been nicked, and they can track it, because these days you have your Find My iPhone or like whatever equivalent, and they can see the exact property
you
that
know
it's
exactly
in,
where it is,
and they report it to the police and they say, here is my phone, it was only taken a few hours ago, so I know it's been nicked, it's not been sold on, whatever. Can you go there? And they'll say that there isn't enough evidence to go and investigate.
It's bizarre,
but there are people taking this into their own hands. I saw a video of a girl who whose AirPods were nicked, and she went to the house on her own, and you think, I mean, on the one hand, good for her. On the other hand, you're going to end up with some really sticky situations if people keep doing this.
I did something similar. I lost my iPad at one point, and I thought it had been stolen because I didn't remember what I'd done. It turned out I'd left it on a bus anyway, and I was tracking it, and I thought I'm going to go and I'm just going to go and get it back, you know. And I could see it was in this address in Camberwell, and I got all ready for it. And I thought I'm not going to go tonight because I've had a couple of drinks. I'll wait till tomorrow after work. So I went down after work. And I got all the way down, and I was
really ready to go.
Loins. I was ready to bash through the door, and I got there. It was the Lost Property Office of TfL, who were very kind and gave it back to me and went, you know, you really shouldn't leave bags on the bus. And I was like, thanks very much indeed. But I also had my phone stolen last year, and I bored everybody to death with the story. But when it happened, there was literally a police officer in a van across the street on the other side of the road. And so I went over to him and he said, oh, I'm really sorry. He said, I had mine nicked the other day as well. And I'm like, aren't you going to go after him? This guy was on a moped. He was in a van. He said, oh, I can't get over the curb. He said, the best thing to do is just report it online.
Oh, goodness.
And I just went, and I was like, and I got home, and again, I could track it. I could see where it was. But they weren't interested, you know.
It's things as well like shoplifting, where effectively almost zero action is taken. I remember back when I worked in a shop years ago, someone was nicking Pokemon cards. They were stealing Pokemon cards because apparently they resold for really high values. And I saw this guy, clocked him from across the shop, and I could see what he was doing, but he was being quite subtle about it. So I just slowly walked across the shop, and as he left, I saw him go down the street. There were two community support officers, and I said to them, that guy's just nicked from us, I'm going to, like, can you help? And they said, I said, he's there. Can you just go and just ask him for the stuff back? Right. Oh, well, we can't. So I just wandered over to the guy, very polite, and I said, can we have that back, please, mate? Yeah. And he was really flustered and gave it back to me. It wasn't a kind of really intense situation at all, but I just thought, surely...
Yeah, why couldn't they do that? That's ridiculous.
And clearly it's policy. I mean, clearly there is a policy that says that they shouldn't, but in my view, the policy's wrong then.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, if the police can't intervene, what's the point of the police? If they're not going to do that and they're just going to kind of investigate later, as they now sometimes say they do when they have these, you know, pro-Palestinian marches, they don't arrest anybody, they just film them and then they try and find them later. But
I think sorry, Mike, I was just going to say, I think it's such a shame for so many police officers who are really, really good, dedicated people who work so hard, but due to policy, direction, funding issues, whatever it might be, a lot of them feel frustrated they can't do their jobs. when I was an MP, I spent a lot of time with our local police forces, really trying to learn about the issues they're facing and the reality of it on the ground. Like, what are the problems?
Right.
Is it funding cuts? Is it more? Is it policy? And it was fascinating for me to get a really good insight, but also just taught me that these are really good people, but who have a really bad reputation with a lot of the public now.
Well, that's the
because
trouble.
of things like this.
Yeah, that's the problem. And, you know, the stories that we tell them, which are that so few crimes actually get solved. You know, the number, I think it's a low, you know, 5%, 6% of crimes actually getting solved. So according to this piece in the Times, the lack of funding will force police to deprioritise crimes like shoplifting and phone theft. Well, I mean, they can't deprioritise them any more than they already have, can they?
My favourite bit in this was, you know, the National Police Chiefs Council saying, this will be the impact of the funding package we've been given. And Rachel Reeves saying, no, it won't.
Well, there you go. That's another lie from Labour. Yeah, it's apparently she says that she's given an extra £2.1 billion for policing over the next 3 years, a real terms increase of 1.7% each year. But, I mean, the police are just saying they haven't got the money to do to patrol parks and attend schools. Well, in that case, you know, our streets become less safe, people have less, you know, likelihood of going out, and then you end up with sort of ghost-type cities. I mean, it's not happening in London, but, you know, the level of crime on the streets in many cities now is unacceptable.
Absolutely. I mean, I've had friends who've had stuff nicked, been mugged, you know, been assaulted, whatever. And, you know, I think the police have spoken to them, but very few of those have actually led to anything. And that in itself, I think it just makes it feed into this feel that there's a bit of societal breakdown at the moment.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you were saying, you know, it's great to be back in Britain, but there is a sense, certainly now, and I don't think it's been like this, it hasn't been this bad for a long time. Feels to me like the 70s, which you're probably too young to remember. But there was a certain lawlessness about what everybody was doing. People were kind of rude to each other. There wasn't any great sense of community, you know, and that kind of, it sort of feels a bit like that. People haven't got any great faith in anything.
It's almost like we need a strong right-wing female leader to swoop in and save the day.
That would be good. Absolutely right. Speaking of strong right-wing female leaders, how about Nadine Dorries? She's on the front page of the Mail today in a bikini.
She looks incredible.
She looks great, doesn't she?
I'm very envious.
68 years old. She says it's the first time in about 6 or 7 years that she's been able to put a bikini on because she's been putting a bit of weight on, which is understandable. The joy of my first Manjaro summer. So, like everybody else who's apparently walking around, she's on Manjaro.
These weight loss jabs are everywhere at the moment, and they work. They work really effectively. I think a lot of people are concerned about the kind of reversibility, though. So once you stop taking it, once you've hit your desired weight, how easy is it to maintain that weight? And I think there have been cases of people putting at least a bit back on as soon as they come off the jab because your appetite increases.
Because people tell me it's kind of it's not much fun because it basically kills your appetite. You don't actually want to eat very much, and you don't really enjoy what you do eat, and you don't really want to drink either.
Yeah, I've got a friend who, you know, loves food, loves drink in the healthy kind of way, and has been on it and really struggled and had no end of stomach problems. And I won't get into it because I don't think your listeners and viewers want to hear.
I've heard about
but really struggled. I mean, she looks incredible. She's lost a wonderful amount of weight and looks lovely. But I think it's good. It's good because losing weight is hard. I mean, I've put on a fair bit since I left. I try and hide it well around the middle, as you do. But it's really difficult, and I keep looking in the mirror going, oh, I need to cut something out. But I love potatoes, I love bread, I love alcohol, so we are where we are.
Yeah, those are all the things that put the weight on.
All the good stuff.
Exactly right. Because, I mean, my worry is, though, as well, that we don't know as much as probably we ought to about these things. And the NHS is very good at pushing it. And I mean, every now and again you read a story about, oh, you know, these weight loss jabs, not only are they good for your health and help you lose weight, but they might help you if you're recovering from cancer. They might, you know, they're always coming up with new reasons to take them almost. And there's a piece in the Times today where it says weight loss jabs could eventually be doled out like statins, according to Professor Sir Stephen Powis, medical director of the NHS, because they've kind of got into this idea that if we can reduce the nation's obesity, then the NHS will have fewer problems and less, you know, sort of overweight people to deal with.
I think there's something to be said for that. I mean, there are a lot of issues related to obesity in the NHS, that kind of long-term healthcare that's needed, some major operations that come off the back of it with, you know, heart disease and things like that. So I understand it, and obviously having a fitter, healthier nation is no bad thing at all, as long as it's working for people and as long as it's long-term, because what we don't want is to have people who are then on these kind of yo-yo weight loss regimes where, oh, I've been off it for 6 months, I need to go back on the jabs or whatever.
Right.
That's not really sustainable.
But doesn't it
either.
also depend on you know, how much it's costing the NHS as well? Because this is the other problem. I mean, the NHS has got so many problems. You know, they're getting an extra 30 billion from Rachel Reeves this year alone, and even the NHS have said it's not going to make any difference.
Yes.
We're literally it's just going to be a drop in the ocean. It won't improve anything. I mean, you know, again, talking about the Starmer and Reeves lies, collectively they keep saying we're bringing the waiting list down. What they're doing is actually moving people around, because what's happening is that, you know, I get every single day people telling me, oh, I've had my operation cancelled. They've made me another operation and now they've cancelled that. And they're sort of moving people from one waiting list to another. They're not reducing them.
I think it's one of the problem with targets. You need targets loosely, don't you, in order to have something to strive towards and aim towards. But when hitting the target becomes the target, you know that there's an issue. And I have really conflicting views of our NHS, which is probably a very controversial thing for a former politician to say, but I've had some incredible treatment and I've seen family have some incredible treatment through the NHS. And the contrapoint, the places where it really doesn't work for people with long-term illnesses and kind of left to fester. You know, I was on a waiting list for the best part of 4 years to see a neurologist and kept getting kicked off a list, put back on, kicked off the list.
Ridiculous.
As someone who suffers day to day with chronic migraine, and this is an experience that thousands and thousands of people have in the NHS, if not millions. And I do think the time has to come very soon for politicians of all stripes and community leaders of all stripes to come together and have a very, very frank and honest conversation about what the future of healthcare looks like in this country, because the NHS is not working in the way that we want it to work at the moment. If it's an acute thing, if you break a leg, they're fantastic. But for the longer term conditions that need really careful management, we just are not resourced well enough.
The time you have to wait in an A&E department if you have to go in for something like that, the time that you have to wait to try and see a doctor. I mean, you know, every day we get people saying, oh, I just called the doctor's office, tried to get an appointment, they haven't got one for 4 weeks. The next one they've got is in July.
Well, I've now got the perspective, obviously, of living in Brazil and seeing that different healthcare service. It's fantastic. I mean, we're mainly accessing private there through the work that my partner does and what have you. But I mean, I will text my doctor's surgery in the morning to say I'm having this problem. I'll have a WhatsApp call with him at some point in the afternoon, have my prescription delivered by phone later that afternoon, and walk to the chemist, show it them on my phone and pick it up.
Right.
It's a very, very different experience, and it's brilliant in many ways, but I haven't experienced the public healthcare there, so I wouldn't want to...
probably not like that for everybody in...
But I've heard even there that public healthcare is great.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, whenever I've been on holiday and one of my kids has needed something doing because they were always having accidents, you know, whichever country I was in, it was always really easy and really straightforward, and you didn't have to do any waiting around, and it was fantastic, you know. And so when we go, you know, the NHS is the pride of Britain, it's the greatest healthcare system in the world. It isn't.
Well, there's a reason that
it just isn't.
Cancer survival rates are less here than in some of our Western European counterparts. There's a reason that a lot of other, you know, long-term wait lists are longer in Britain than our European counterparts. We can believe in the NHS, we can thank the NHS, we can really be proud of it, whilst also wanting to learn lessons and make it better and make it work for people better. And we need to be honest about it, Mike. But people are terrified to criticise the NHS
I think it's changing, because, you know, I've been basically, you know, banging it into people's heads, you know, start telling the truth, start actually admitting that it's not working. Deanna, great to see you. We're out of time, amazingly. First hour has gone by very, very quickly indeed. Deanna Davidson, hopefully we'll see you again at some point soon. We'll be back coming up after the news with the latest from the Middle East. It turns out that there are retaliatory strikes going on as we speak. More drones attacking Israel, more Israel airstrikes on Iran. We'll be back after this. We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going around that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. And what about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide ride surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the Scouts to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
Where everywhere is pitch.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 7:03. I'm Mike Graham. It is Friday the 13th, ladies and gentlemen. Some people think that's a bad omen. I'm not so sure. I don't know if you think that Friday the 13th leads you into some bad places. Certainly the news this morning is pretty bad. Obviously, we've got the outbreak of what can only be described as, you know, what could potentially turn into a massive war in the Middle East. We've got Israel attacking Iran overnight. More than 100 strikes on Iranian facilities, missile sites and all sorts of other military operations. We've got retaliation from Iran. They've sent a load of drones towards Israel, which will hopefully be protected from hitting anybody because of their Iron Dome system, which is incredibly good. We've also got the stories this morning in the paper about one man, an incredible story about Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, an Indian man who lives in Britain. He lives in Leicester. He was on the plane yesterday that was heading for Gatwick when it left Ahmedabad Airport, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. He's the only survivor. An incredible story. He was in seat 11A. Nobody can explain how he got out. Nobody can explain anything about how he's even able to walk around. I don't know how I'm alive, is what it says on the front page of the Daily Mail. We'll bring you more on that story as we go forward, of course. We're also going to talk continually about the police, because they're saying now they haven't got enough money to look after petty small crimes like shoplifting and theft, because they just can't look after it. They're not going to chase anybody who's stolen your mobile phone. They're not going to arrest anybody who's nicked something from a shop. They say they can't afford to do it anymore. So we'll talk about that. Also, what's going on with the Labour government? Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. Well, my head's spinning from this week. They're just crazy people implementing misery on us all. And also, my Facebook memory from a year ago today was Keir Starmer saying that he only supported Jeremy Corbyn because he didn't think he'd win. So even my memories on Facebook are propping up now about lies he was telling a year ago. Oh, it's awful.
Yes, it's not really terribly great, is it? We've got Rachel Reeves being accused of making up numbers. That's in the Telegraph this morning. We've got Keir Starmer accused also of telling porkies when it comes to why they took the money from schools on VAT. He was saying that they were going to use it to make more houses available to people, which of course is complete and utter nonsense. Also, we'll be talking about why the French police are wasting £480 million of our money by not stopping any of the illegal migrants coming here. And Darren Jones, he was on Newsnight last night night, claiming that most of the illegal migrants coming here are actually women and children. Incorrect, not true. 0344 499 1000 is the number. It's 5 minutes past 7. It's Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Sarah says this, Mike, if the government are giving money away, can I have some, please? Oh, wait, I'm a white English pensioner, so I don't qualify. And one from Kevin in Barnstaple. That little door manners gem from Deanna tells you everything you need to know about Keir Starmer. Yeah, she told a story about how whenever she held a door open for Keir Starmer when she was in the House of Commons with him, he would never say thank you. He would never acknowledge her. He would never look at her. He would never even almost admit that she was there. And if that was because she was a Tory MP, I think that tells you an awful lot about the man, I'm afraid. Let's talk now, though, to Emma Henderson, MBE, former airline captain, because the story in the papers this morning, very much dominating them, of course, is the crash of the Air India plane yesterday. It happened just before the end of this show, around about 9:30 yesterday morning. It was bound for Gatwick. It had more than 290 people on it, and they all perished apart from one man, apparently, who was seated in seat 11A. Nobody can explain how he got out of there alive. He can't explain it. He said, I stood up and ran. Bits of plane were all around. The plane apparently landed on some buildings just off the runway, because it only got about 600 feet in the air from what we can see. Emma, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
It's a terrible, terrible story, this, and I mean, as I say, it broke just yesterday, as before we were coming to an end of this show, and it's obviously not clear yet what happened. But I mean, is it possible to rule some things out? I mean, I've seen stories this morning of suggestions that the plane just didn't have enough thrust, it didn't have enough lift, maybe the flaps weren't in the right position. I mean, what are you making of it?
Yeah, well, that's the sorts of questions investigators will be looking at, of course, because we work with facts in aviation. We don't speculate when we have accidents and incidents like this taking place. But there are some facts that we've been able to see, because, of course, we've got that terrible video that we've been able to see of the aircraft taking off and then not climbing. And one of the biggest things that is an anomaly is that the landing gear, that's the wheels that the aircraft sits on, you can see there the wheels are down. So, you know, they shouldn't be. So the biggest question really in everyone's minds is, why is the landing gear down, and is that a human error? Is that a mechanical fault? Is that a software fault? And they're the sorts of questions that investigators are going to be looking at when they try and piece together the bits of this jigsaw puzzle to find out what went wrong.
Yeah, I mean, in the Sun they've got 4 possible kind of, you know, crash theories. One is the plane didn't use enough runway. Planes get less lift on a hot day due to lower air density, so they need to go faster. I mean, I assume you've probably been in this position. You've probably taken planes up in the air in hot conditions. Is that right? Is that something that changes the dynamic, if you like?
Yeah, very much so. So one of the things you learn when you're doing the exams that you have to take to become a commercial airline pilot in the first place is the effect of heat, humidity and altitude on takeoff performance. So that is calculated from, you tell the aircraft software where you're going to be taking off from on the runway, and performance calculations are done on, we have an iPad type tablet in the flight deck that has all the performance calculations in it, which you would double check with, you cross check with each other. So indeed, if that was the case, that the aircraft took off from an intersection, there will be questions asked about why, because it was a heavy aircraft that was doing a long journey back to Gatwick. And so, you know, there will be questions asked about why wouldn't they use the full runway length. You know, that's definitely going to be a factor, but that's not necessarily going to be the reason. That's not why the gear was left down. No. And that's not why, you know, we know that there was a Mayday call put out from one of the pilots saying that they didn't have any thrust and they couldn't climb. So, you know, was there some sort of engine failure? Was there some sort of problem with, could they not get the gear retracted? Although, you know, that in itself wouldn't stop the aircraft from climbing.
Right. So how quickly do the wheels come? I mean, you can usually hear them, can't you, when you're sitting on the plane? I mean, do you lift the wheels up pretty much as soon as you're off the ground?
Absolutely. So anyone who's flown, you'll hear, you know, as the aircraft takes off, the first noise that you will hear is the landing gear being retracted into the undercarriage. And we do that because of having that dangling down underneath the aircraft creates a lot of drag. Right. We don't want drag. We want the aircraft to be as smooth and slippery as possible so that we can climb it away into the air. So, yeah, it's the first thing that happens on takeoff is both pilots confirm that there is a positive climb rate, and that positive climb call triggers the gear up command to get the landing gear folded away, as I mentioned before.
There's an interesting piece in one of the papers this morning in which it says an Air India passenger made a video appearing to show electrical fittings, including air conditioning and seat back screens, not working on the plane a few hours before it crashed. And there's been some sort of dithering about whether or not this is actually the same plane, but apparently it seems to be. Flight data confirms the Boeing Dreamliner flew in from Delhi to the western city of Ahmedabad yesterday morning. So he's basically posted pictures of the inside of the plane where none of the electrical equipment seems to be working. I mean, could it be that would affect the wheels in some way?
Well, that is something that, again, investigators will be looking for. And, of course, all of that crucial information is contained within the black boxes that are always mentioned in these situations.
Right.
They need the black boxes to be able to find all of that information to see, was there an issue on board?
Right.
If the screen's not working, isn't necessarily an indicator of anything else going on. It might just be they had the screen switched off. So, that is something that is controllable on the aircraft.
Yeah.
So
but they were saying the air conditioning wasn't working either. But again, as you say, you won't know. But just to go back to the circumstances of the takeoff, if the plane was not if the pilot was not capable of getting the plane up in the air, I mean, presumably he would have been looking for somewhere where he could land, and obviously that wasn't. He didn't have very many options there.
Absolutely, and it's quite possible that the intent was to try and avoid as many buildings as possible once the horrific realisation. And we have got to remember, obviously, the pilots knew what was about to happen.
Yeah.
Passengers may not have done, but some of them may have realised. But the pilots will have known at some point fairly early on what was about to happen. So they will have tried to have avoided as much built-up space as possible. But, there's very little you can do. As you say, it reached 625 feet as its maximum height. So, there's not a lot you can do with that, really.
No, and I guess you can't really make every airport safe from the point of view of not having any buildings around it, can you?
You can't, but there are quite strict regulations in place around the building of airports and the building of runways and clearways at the end of runways. And, when airports are designed, these sorts of things are taken into consideration. So there are building regulations that prevent tall buildings from being put up near runways. But, this was not within that boundary. No. So, there's not very. You can't just not have any buildings around airport.
No, it just isn't viable, is it? I mean, even places like Heathrow, you've got houses all around it. You can't. There's not much you can really do. What about a bird strike? I mean, they're saying that possibly both engines could have been hit by a bird strike. I mean, that's quite rare, isn't it?
It's not as rare as you might think because, if you think about the layout of an airport, it's a big flat piece of ground where nobody else can go. And other than aircraft taking off every now and again, or even quite frequently, there's lots of grass. They're great places for birds to nest, and airports go to great lengths to manage birds in the airport environment. So there are birds, of course, around airports, probably more than there would be in built-up areas even. So it's not unusual for aircraft and birds to collide. It doesn't usually work out that well for the bird, but it can cause a lot of damage to an aircraft engine. Obviously, we saw with the Hudson River landing what happened when aircraft collide with big birds. Whether or not there was bird activity on a hot day around the airport at that time, that's another thing that investigators will be looking at. But certainly a bird going down an engine does make a large bang, and that's certainly something that has happened. I've had a bird down an engine coming out of Corfu one day, and the bang was loud indeed, but it didn't damage the engine. And I think that's the other thing. Engines are very, very robust and designed to withstand this sort of thing. So to have that happen to both engines would be really quite unusual.
Right. And when that happened to you in Corfu, did you just carry on flying, or did you have to come back?
Yeah, we carried on flying, and we are obviously trained to deal with situations like that. So we have procedures that we follow, and the first procedure is keep the aircraft flying, keep the aircraft in the air. Can we do that? And if you can, then you can start to, the next bit is navigating to a place of safety.
Yeah.
And in that case, it would be to get as far away from the ground as possible to buy you time to work out what you're going to do next. And in my situation, that was a case of checking the engine instruments, and everything was still running fine. We actually flew back to Gatwick with that situation, and the aircraft was fine, and it had to be inspected by an engineer when we landed, as you would expect. But it does depend very much. It was a reasonable sized bird as well. It was an egret, so but it didn't damage the engine, I think, is the main point there.
And there's been a lot of questions for Boeing, hasn't there, over time? I mean, they settled a lawsuit apparently just last month with the US Department of Justice over the 737 MAX crashes that there seemed to be an awful lot of at one particular time. It was a few years ago now. But they've had financial woes, they've had delays in production, they've had problems with, all sorts of technical issues over time. But the Dreamliner has been a relatively safe plane, hasn't it?
It has. This is the first hull loss that the Boeing Dreamliner has seen. It's a reliable workhorse. It's got a good safety record. And, it's obviously a terrible day for Boeing. And actually, this might not be a Boeing thing. So part of the investigation will be looking at, is this a Boeing problem? Is it a Dreamliner problem? Is it an airport problem, an airline problem? Or is it a pilot problem?
Yeah.
And whatever the problem is discovered to be, that can be designed and trained out, because what aviation is very good at and is world leading at is learning from mistakes and implementing changes immediately to make sure that things like this can't happen again, because we need aviation to be as safe as it can possibly be.
Sure.
So the investigation will produce recommendations.
Yeah. And in terms of the survivor, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, I mean, an incredible story. He was seated in row 11A. I guess you can't really explain how he got out.
There is absolutely no explanation for that. I think it's incredible. I mean, very wonderful that he's survived, obviously, but it's going to be very difficult for him to be the sole survivor of such a terrible accident like that. But there is no explanation for that whatsoever.
I mean, he was by the emergency exit, so maybe that was something that helped him. But yeah, that's a tragic story, and just awful. So listen, thank you so much for explaining all of that to us. Emma Henderson, MBE, former airline captain there, giving us the benefit of what she could say about what could have happened. But clearly, the plane was pretty much doomed from the moment it took off. It just, whatever was wrong. Nobody's really suggesting it was any kind of terrorist attack. It was just they simply couldn't lift the plane off the ground up in the air, which is dreadful. Morning, Mike. I've been whacking my brains and researching for weeks to try and find an example of any other time that a government has held the people in as much contempt as this one does now, says Samantha. Since the Long Parliament of 1640 and right up until the suffragette movement, I can find very few examples. Interesting. And Stephen says this, morning, Mike, a week ago we were on a war footing. Now it's not even mentioned, so presumably Starmer has solved the war. What a guy. Let's get a voice note from Richard.
Hi Mike, Richard from Cobra here. Happy Friday to you, sir. Just to let you know that in January I took the decision to rebuild my motorcycle engine. I figured that if I did 2 Saturdays a month and lived like a monk for 6 months, I could put £600 a month away into my account, and then in 6 months I would have my new motorcycle engine and my finances would be unaffected. This is the last month, being June, and it's actually worked out fine. I'm happy to say, but then again, I'm not the Chancellor of the Exchequer. All the best, have a great weekend, bye.
Richard, I'm glad to hear it. Well, wait until you find out that she's put a new tax on the motorcycle engine that you didn't know you had to pay for. But yeah, I mean, that's what most people do, isn't it? You budget for the future, you budget for things that might have to happen, you budget for things that you can't afford, and you say, well, I'll have to do without that this week. You don't just go, I can now do anything I want. I can just spend all this money I don't have, and I'll just keep borrowing more because, that's what we can do. You can't live like that. You can't run a country like that. You can't run a household like that. How the heck is she managing to run this country into the ground in such a fast form, in such a bad way? How can she have taken what was an economy which was doing okay, actually, back in June of last year? This time last year, the economy was in pretty good shape. Now it's a basket case. 7:20.
that Air India flight was supposed to arrive here at Gatwick at 6:25 this evening. Flight radar information showed it didn't get more than 650 feet off the ground. 242 passengers and crew members on that Air India 171 flight. 53 British nationals were among that 242. 169 Indian nationals and also 1 Canadian and 1 Portuguese national. The plane itself was a Boeing 787, a Dreamliner. We understand it was around 11 years old. The pilot had some 8,000 hours of experience.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 23 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. It's Friday the 13th, ladies and gentlemen. And, of course, we have reached the end of yet another fascinating week in the world of politics. We've got two big stories we're covering at the moment, obviously, which are not political. One is that there was Israeli airstrikes over Iran last night. More than 100 drones have been launched since then towards Israel in the last few hours after Iran vowed retaliation for those Israeli strikes. They've been taking out missile sites. They've been taking out various military installations as well. I spoke to a former spokesman for the IDF in the first hour of the show who said this is likely to go on for some time, several days, maybe several weeks. So there's a conflict now. Keir Starmer has come out and basically said that everybody should calm down. I don't think he's quite got the right end of the stick there. Also, a bit of breaking news. An Air India flight was forced to make an emergency landing today after a bomb threat less than 24 hours after the Ahmedabad air disaster. Flight AI379 was travelling from Thailand's Phuket to India's capital, New Delhi, but had to suddenly land again after an explosion warning. So we'll bring you more on that, of course. It was an Air India flight, of course, that crashed in Ahmedabad yesterday with more than 290 people losing their lives. And one incredible story of a survivor, a man who was seated in row 11 and somehow managed to get out. Incredible story. Let's talk to Benedict Spence now, a political commentator, of course. Benedict, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm very well. I don't know if you've seen Keir Starmer's a sort of statement on what's happening in Iran and Israel. He seems to be kind of slightly unsure of whose side he's on. He sort of said that everybody should calm down and de-escalate the situation.
Yeah, de-escalate the situation right after one side sets fire to the other's nuclear facilities. Right. It's a nice idea. Maybe in a couple of weeks after the fires stop, they'll be able to get around the table and talk about it. But
yeah, very possibly. But then again, Iran has vowed to wipe Israel off the map. So I guess there's not much point sitting down at the table with them, is there?
Oh gosh. Oh, well, I guess nobody's listening to Keir then, are they? The international statesman that he is. One doesn't mean to be unnecessarily cruel about our Prime Minister, but whenever he sort of speaks on the international stage, I think we are reminded that the UK is not quite the power that it once was, nor that a lot of its members would like it to be. No. Keir Starmer does not have a lot of pull with the Netanyahu government, and if he doesn't have that, I suspect he has even less with the Ayatollah.
Right. It may have something to do with the fact that the Foreign Secretary called for Netanyahu to be arrested if he came to this country, which is not very helpful, really, is it?
No, it's not. It's especially given that Israel is supposed to be one of our allies, and it was not, in fact, the line that we had to take. Other countries in Europe, other allies of Israel, who have been very critical of how Israel has prosecuted the war in Gaza, have not, in fact, gone the whole hog and said, yes, it's time to start arresting people if they come. Plenty of them have said that they will simply ignore the arrest warrant against Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant if they visit their countries. So why it is that the UK has to be the sort of holier-than-thou thing, I don't know. Of course, we do know why. It's because they're appealing to members of their base who they fear will be very upset if they don't to arrest these people, because there's that tendency in the Labour Party who believes that Israel is evil, committing genocide, and is responsible for everything that ever happens under the sun. But, you know, that's just our governing party in step with those people. You know, that's reassuring. It's fine.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely not a problem at all. Here, of course, has engaged the wrath of some of those people in the Labour Party, because when he made his kind of, you know, Island of Strangers speech, he basically said that, you know, we were in danger of having people, so many people from this in this country, from other countries, that we wouldn't recognise it. And of course, he was then accused by various people of imitating Enoch Powell. Some people even started calling him Enoch Starmer. But he's now said in an interview, a sort of soul-searching interview in the New Statesman, he says that he now regrets saying that, and he regrets making that Island of Strangers speech.
Is there anything this man doesn't U-turn on? You know, this sort of fantastic, relatively, speech where he actually came out and said, yes, we recognise the problem. And he's already come out and gone, oh, maybe I wish I hadn't recognised the problem.
Yes.
Maybe I said the quiet part out loud. I think through the prism of what has happened overnight, though, actually the Island of Strangers speech, and I don't want to compare it to Enoch Powell, because, you know, whenever people compare it to Enoch Powell, they just demonstrate that they don't know anything about Enoch Powell's speech.
Right.
But actually talking about the dangers of mass migration, or indeed of open borders, Iran is not a friendly nation to the UK. Iran does not operate necessarily through conventional military means. If you don't have a secure border and there are millions of people coming into your country, I mean, I'm sorry, there's no better way, if you were Iran, of getting operatives into the UK. You know, once upon a time, you'd have to work really hard to get your to get your operatives and your sympathizers into a foreign nation that was hostile. But today, you know, it's if you're Iran or if you're Russia or whoever, you just look at the UK and go, there must be a catch. There must be something going on. It cannot be this easy. But it really is.
It totally is. And once again, I'm afraid we've had a week of kind of, you know, truths and untruths and lies and damned lies and statistics and all of those things that we say quite a lot about the Labour government. You know, we have Keir Starmer putting out a most bizarre tweet, which has been roundly condemned because it's not true, in which he said that, you know, one of the things that we wanted to do was to put VAT on schools. We did that, and now that proves that we were right, because we can now spend that money on building houses. And everyone's going, well, hang on a minute. You said that money was going to go into the school system to provide for 6,500 teachers, and that it was going to help children in the state system who really needed more financial help than the rich of this country who can afford to pay VAT.
Yeah, I mean, the whole schools VAT thing will end up costing the government money anyway, but the fact that they're sort of copy and pasting it and using it to say that they're paying for all sorts of other things is incredible brass, I have to say that.
Isn't it? Well, it's also double counting, isn't it? Because, I mean, I'll show you this clip, which is Rachel Reeves, actually, this week on the spending review, saying the exact opposite. Check it out.
That is why at the budget last autumn, I ended the tax loophole which exempted private schools from VAT and business rates. And I put that money where it belongs, into helping the 93% of children in our state schools.
Bridget Phillipson's got a particularly evil grin there. I'm not quite sure who she's trying to impress with that. But so Labour are now telling us that they're spending it twice. So not only are they putting it into the school system, they're also building houses with it.
I was going to say, Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, is grinning as they say that they're spending it twice. Probably doesn't realise what's been said. You know, she's probably not even that evil. She's just clueless. And it's like they're going, yes, the figures add up. And you've got Rishi Sunak somewhere banging his head against a table going, I told you all, you need basic maths. Why did nobody listen to me? There needs to be maths to 18, because this is what you get if you don't have maths to 18. Right. You get a government of people who physically can't count. But the really frustrating thing about the taxing, the VAT on schools, is that there will be people who will actually buy that line. Right. Is that they will be so sort of embedded in this sort of class war idea of what it is that a Labour government has to be, and how it is that we have to just tax the rich, bro, just tax them a little bit more, and you'll solve all the country's problems. Everybody with a brain knows that this will cost the country more money than it will actually raise. It's going to damage children's education. You struggle to think of many more deliberately nasty, damaging policies. But this is the one, and they're putting it front and centre saying, good news, everybody, it's going to pay for all the good stuff, when we all know it's not true.
No, exactly right. And again, that's been the sort of the... it's become so regular now, the lies that they tell, that, I mean, I don't know whether they don't know they're doing it. My suspicion is they do know they're doing it, but they're just busily trying to convince everybody that if they keep saying it often enough, people will believe it.
Yeah, the spirit of Alistair Campbell spinning is alive and well in this party, and again, very demoralising given that right now Reform are polling so well, because they're offering a sort of a sense of something a bit different. Now, I have many disagreements with the Reform Party and their approach, but what they're trying, at the very least trying to say is, look, we're going to be quite upfront. We're going to try and cut waste. We're going to try and give a sort of an honest Bob sort of politics. And people, without having many policies beyond just things on immigration, are flocking to Reform because they've had enough of the lies of the two established parties. They've had enough of being told one thing and getting another. And you can't, and you sort of think, can the Labour Party not sit there and see Reform's polling and go, maybe if we didn't try to be like the classic Labour Party, maybe we didn't try to lie through our teeth, people might respond positively. But no, that just won't do. They're going to have to just pretend, aren't we all very clever? It's all Machiavellian politics. Isn't Morgan McSweeney a genius? You know, this is what we're going to get for the next 4 years, and it's just going to continue to damage the country.
Yeah, I mean, that is the disappointing and slightly depressing part of it all, is that how far down the gurgler is the economy actually going to go? I mean, the day after the spending review, yesterday, we get news that the economy has in fact shrunk 0.3%, not very much, but still, nonetheless, it's still shrunk. I bet you if it had gone up 0.3%, you know, Rachel Reeves would be busy crowing about, oh, look, it's all working. The plan is working.
Yeah, and the UK's economy, as we saw over COVID and the Ukraine war, is uniquely vulnerable to international events. It's far less robust than a lot of our allies and a lot of our competitors. With what's just sort of happened overnight in the next round of hostilities in the Middle East, oil prices are already up. You suspect that they will continue to rise.
Yeah.
That is going to be one of those things that is going to punch the British economy in the mouth. Things are not about to get better. I'm sorry. Just yesterday we were hearing of how it's a bold gamble from Rachel Reeves, and I suspect partly because of things outside of her control, it probably has already not paid off.
Yes, absolutely right. Benedict, good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Benedict Spencer, political commentator on the subject of Israel. Cleo says Israel has no option but to strike Iran. Iran has stated repeatedly their goal is to wipe Israel from the map. Imagine the hysteria if Israel had said that. Dan from Kent says, morning, Mike. I'm fed up with people in their safe little Western homes accusing Israel of genocide. It's bloody war, for God's sake. And Peter says, Rodney is so wet with his Israel statements. Iran were days away from having a nuke. Israel is smashing the gangs, unlike Labour. You plonker. Peter Croydon. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we're going to talk to LaDonna Harvey over in the United States of America. We'll get her view on what's going on over there, plus what Boeing is saying about this terrible plane crash yesterday in India. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:35. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense, and we'll be giving it to you all the way through the day, all the way through the weekend, of course, as well. We've got lots to talk about this morning, and we've got LaDonna Harvey coming up very shortly on what's happening in America. She's from Arizona Morning News, KTAR, in Phoenix. Let's get a voice note from Steve.
Morning, Mike. This is Stephen Hart's. Very interesting conversations this morning, as usual. Coming from the perspective of a working class man, and I work on social housing, so I get to speak to working class people day in, day out. I'll tell you what makes us angry is we do not live in a democracy anymore. And no matter how many times we vote for political parties that promise to drop immigration, they just go ahead and raise it. We do not live in a parliamentary democracy anymore. Our MPs are not representing the will and the needs of the constituents. They're just following their own party line and the agenda. That's what really, really makes us cross. Anyway, have a great day, bud, and a great weekend.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. The same to you. Yeah, I think what people find frustrating and the most annoying thing about this government is that they are pretending they're doing one thing when they're actually doing another. They're claiming one thing and not doing it. They're saying they're not going to do things that they end up doing. And that's the problem. It's the hypocrisy and it's the lies. One from Mark who says, morning, from Somerset, police chiefs say they're going to have to go soft on theft, which is quite a serious offence. Do you think they'll leave the motorist alone with minor offences like trying to catch you doing 32 in a 30? No, I don't think so. Worse than that, how about 22 in a 20? And Brendan says, Mike, I've said it before, for the migrant population, porter cabins on MOD land and or similar facilities in the Falklands while they were awaiting their claim for asylum. Perfectly reasonable suggestion, I think. Let's talk to LaDonna Harvey to see what she makes of it all. LaDonna, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
We're going to be talking about the president in a moment, but just before I do that, obviously a lot of interest in Boeing at the moment after that terrible air crash in Ahmedabad in India, the Boeing Dreamliner, which up until now has been relatively safe, but Boeing has been a pretty troubled company of late, hasn't it?
It's had a lot of trouble, not with the Dreamliner, strangely. This is the first crash involving a Dreamliner, as, you know, about 260 people now, I think, we have who have died on or during this plane crash, whether it was on the ground or in the air. Boeing has had big trouble with its space program as it left some astronauts stranded in space for a while. Elon Musk had to go get them. And with its airplanes coming off the line with problems blowing hatches, not enough screws in the doors, things like that. I don't know if this is reflective of that because we just still don't know what happened. But the Dreamliner has not had trouble, so I suspect something else happened.
Yeah, exactly right. And I'm presuming they'll have to ground all of these planes now, won't they, until such time as they can find out what happened.
I don't know if they'll ground them. They'll start the investigation pretty quickly, though, to try to figure out what made the plane go down. Because, I mean, if you watch this video, the plane looks fine, except it's moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
When it starts to go down, it's not like there's a loss of control of the plane or it flipped over or something really weird happened.
Yeah, no, they just said they couldn't get any thrust, and I've just spoken to a pilot who said, it's very unusual for the wheels to be down because normally the wheels are brought up immediately you leave the ground, and quite often that can create quite a bad drag. It could be some kind of hydraulic failure. I mean, nobody really knows, but just horrific.
Yeah, it's just awful. Any plane crash is jarring when you see it and you realize just how many people were on board and how often so many of us fly.
Yeah.
But they are still incredibly rare.
They are, thank goodness. Let's talk about what's happened overnight in the Middle East. It looks as though Israel has launched a whole series of attacks on military bases and various other, installations and missile sites and everything in Iran. Iran has, of course, retaliated. We'll expect to hear from President Trump, I guess, later on today. But I think we've got him on what he said about Iran yesterday.
You provide an update on Iran. We're hearing reports that U.S. personnel are being moved out of the region within striking distance.
Well, they are being moved out because it could be a dangerous place, and we'll see what happens. But they are we've given notice to move out, and we'll see what happens.
Is there anything that could be done to dial the temperature down in the region?
They can't have a nuclear weapon. Very simply. They can't have a nuclear weapon. We're not going to allow that.
Pretty strong words there from Trump. I mean, I spoke to a former Israeli government spokesman yesterday, or rather this morning, who said, you know, obviously Trump would have known about this. Clearly, America was given all the information that Israel had, and so we wait and see what happens.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's it's ramping up what is already a place that's ready to boil over into war. It seems like at any time. Were the strikes very surgical? It seems that they were. They were aiming at some very specific things: the nuclear program, the enrichment program, and I believe they also targeted one Iranian general from the Revolutionary Guard. To say that Iran is a problem is really understating things in a very grave way. Iran has been quietly playing in the background, causing trouble all over the Middle East. And just yesterday, we had a lot of American personnel told, pull out of the Middle East, pull out of United Arab Emirates, get out of some of these areas where you could unfortunately become a target. Yeah. And I would expect Iran to strike back and strike back hard.
Yeah, well, they've already sent, I think, 100 or so drones over into Israel. Right. Most of which have been contained by the Iron Dome system. But the last time they fired hundreds and hundreds of missiles, many of them quite powerful ballistic missiles. Some of them did get through.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but it goes to show, Israel, for a very small country, does know how to defend itself, considering it's been surrounded by enemies since its inception. It's got a pretty good line on how to keep itself safe. Here's hoping that things don't blow up even more.
Yes, exactly right. And how's things in California these days? We've been seeing pictures of the not very widespread riots, as some of the mainstream media commentators have called them, but they look pretty serious to me. How's it going?
Well, they're very serious in very concentrated areas. The part, all of LA is not rioting, to be clear. This is happens like block to block. So it's not a widespread riot, but it's still rioting. So far, Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump continue to try to duke it out. Right. We have the National Guard currently still under the control of the president. Gavin Newsom had gone to court and did get one federal judge to rule for him, saying that he could take control of the National Guard. And an appeals court shot that down very, very quickly and said, no, that's under the auspices of the president right now, and will stay so until there's a better decision. Right. And that should happen on Tuesday. What we are bracing for, though, is, in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott has mobilized National Guard troops there, sending them to Dallas and Houston, San Antonio, and I believe Austin, as we get ready for protests this weekend. A lot of people around the country are mobilizing for the, the No Kings protest, and I guess it's in protest of the Army parade, birthday parade in Washington, D.C., and everybody's got to protest. Everybody's got something to do this weekend. Yeah,
exactly right. And meanwhile, presumably the deportations are going ahead, because the cause of these riots in the beginning was the fact that Mexicans were being sort of rounded up and deported, weren't they?
Sure. All of the unrest started in LA as the president, with immigration, with ICE, started targeting restaurants, hotels, things like that. In their defense, in people's defense, and the ability to protest, which you can do here at any time. It was, we were told that the president was going to go after really mostly criminals, people who were, not just the crime of being here illegally, but people who were here committing crimes and should be thrown out of the country. And now we're seeing wide-scale raids that are just targeting anybody that happens to, fall in the trap of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's weird, you have a dichotomy between Republicans and Democrats on what they believe the immigration system should look like, what the rates should look like. But there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who are like, well, should we be going after people when they're going to court hearings or coming out of court hearings and doing what we're asking them to do, which is go through the process to ask for asylum.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, we've got another clip of Donald Trump here talking about exemptions from being deported.
If you look today, I put out a statement today about farmers. Our farmers are being hurt badly by, they have very good workers. They've worked for them for 20 years. They They're not citizens, but they've turned out to be, great. And we're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back because they don't have maybe what they're supposed to have, maybe not. And you know what's going to happen and what is happening? They get rid of some of the people because, you go into a farm and you look and people they've been there for 20, 25 years and they've worked great and the owner of the farm loves them and everything else. And then you're supposed to throw them out. And you know what happens? The end up hiring the people, the criminals that have come in, the murderers from prisons and everything else. So we're going to have an order on that pretty soon, I think. We can't do that to our farmers and leisure too, hotels. We're going to have to use a lot of common sense on that.
Could you provide an update on Iran?
Subject. Why does Starmer need to touch everyone he speaks to? It's creepy, and he even put his hand on President Trump. Enjoy your show and your guests. Well, I think it's because somebody's told him to do it, because it doesn't look natural. The way that he does it, it's a bit like the same way that the smiles come out. Both he and Rachel Reeves will do that thing where they kind of just smile like that, and they talk with their mouth kind of in a smile, even though it sounds really weird and looks even stranger, because somebody's told them to do it. Some PR, some, spin doctor, some, character advisor has said also, when you're talking to people, just put your hand on them because it makes them feel as if you're more of a caring individual. No, it makes it look creepy. I'm sorry, it just looks weird. And this one from Dave in South Gloucester. Starmer, Reeves, Lammy, Rayner and the rest are humiliating this country and the British people in front of the rest of the world. Chagos, Gibraltar, and allowing thousands of undocumented, unchecked, fighting-age men to freely enter, be supported by and live in our country without restriction, while many of our own people are homeless. At the same time, driving us to energy poverty through Miliband's net zero zealotry. They are arrogant, shameless and devoid of any pride in or respect for this once great nation and its traditions, historic achievements and way of life. Dave in South Gloucester. I think that's a great message. Lots of people will agree with it. I can't imagine who would not agree with it. It's 7:49. Coming up, we'll bring you more and the latest on what's happening in the Middle East.
have also, in the last hour or so, heard from the CEO of Air India, Campbell Wilson, who delivered a statement a bit earlier on. I'll read you some of it. He started by saying he'd like to express his deep sorrow about this event and what's been a difficult day for us at Air India. He also said we have a team working around the clock to support investigators and families in any way we can. He also went on to reiterate some of the things that we already know, that flight A171 was involved in an accident on departure from Ahmedabad Airport shortly after, carrying 230 passengers.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:52. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. It is Friday. It's Friday the 13th, actually. We've got some breaking news overnight, and that is, of course, that an Israeli military spokesperson has said Iran has launched more than 100 drones towards Israel in the last few hours after the country vowed retaliation for Israel's strikes overnight. They launched their attacks on Iran just a few hours ago. One here from Ernie who says, "Good morning, Mike. Gaza was a beautiful, thriving place before Hamas attacked Israel. Now it's a pile of rubble. I think Iran needs to get around the table and find a political solution before everything gets completely out of hand." Well, I mean, certainly I spoke to Jonathan Conrickis a little bit earlier on in the show. He's a former IDF spokesman, and he said that this activity is likely to go on for several days and possibly even longer than that. Let's talk to Elon Levy, now former Israeli government spokesperson and host of Israel, State of a Nation, a podcast. Elon, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So I guess you would echo what we were told by Jonathan Conrickis, that this is the start of what might end up being quite a long campaign by Israel.
Yes, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is warning that this could last at least for several days or as long as is necessary to eliminate the threat of a nuclear Iran. Israel says that it has identified in recent months accelerated Iranian work to weaponize the highly enriched uranium it has already developed in violation of international law and all attempts at diplomacy. And Israel felt that, this is it. The sword is on our throat. This is the last resort. If we do not take action now, then Iran will build a nuclear bomb. And the same Iranian regime that repeatedly threatens to destroy the state of Israel would have the weapons to do that. And that would be a disaster for the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, we heard Donald Trump earlier on as well yesterday saying, they can't have a nuclear bomb, basically, as simple as that. It just can't happen.
Exactly. The United States understands the Iranian regime cannot be allowed to possess nuclear weapons. The regime that leads crowds in chants of death to America, death to England, death to Israel, cannot extend a nuclear umbrella over its terrorist proxies because it would embolden them and because it might actually use those nuclear weapons. Now, maybe they wouldn't because it would be irrational, but you're dealing with a dangerous theocratic regime that could well use nuclear weapons in pursuit of its stated goal of destroying the state of Israel. And that is a risk that Israel cannot take.
No.
So now, for the third time in history, Israel has taken action alone to prevent a dangerous regime from getting nuclear weapons. Did it in 1981. It bombed Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor. It did it in 2007 when it bombed Bashar al-Assad's nuclear reactor. And, I saw the British Prime Minister today saying the strikes are deeply concerning, but I dare say he's thankful that Saddam Hussein and Bashar al-Assad don't have nuclear weapons now, thanks to Israel.
Well, yes, I would imagine so. And, of course, Iran is behind all of the trouble, really, that's anti-Israeli in the Middle East, isn't it? It's against Israel when it comes to Hamas, they fund them. It's against Israel when it comes to Hezbollah in Lebanon, they fund them as well. They're the root, sort of all evil, if you like.
Exactly. The Iranian regime has spent decades and billions of dollars destabilizing countries around the region, pouring money into militias like Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis in order to wage war against Israel. Since the October 7th massacre, we have come under attacked by hundreds, if not thousands, of Iranian drones and missiles, just most of them not launched directly from Iran, but by its partners around the region, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. And we've seen how countries like Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon have suffered from being under the foot of the Iranian regime. Now they're trying to break free. And, you know, if the Iranian regime were ever to get nuclear weapons, it would doom those countries to being under the foot of Iranian oppression.
Yeah, it absolutely would. And you mentioned Keir Starmer earlier on. His statement this morning is the reports of these strikes are concerning, and we urge all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. Escalation serves no one in the region. Are you surprised that it's not slightly more, I don't know, shall we say, on Israel's side?
No, I think Israel is used to world leaders saying one thing in private and another thing in public. I dare say in private, Sir Keir Starmer is probably relieved that Israel is taking military action to prevent a nuclear Iran, because international diplomacy has failed to do that. Iran has enough highly enriched uranium for at least 10 nuclear bombs because of the failure of international diplomacy. And so Israel is taking action now where international diplomacy has failed, and a nuclear Iran would obviously be a disaster for Britain, given its presence and forces in the region, given that the Iranian regime leads chance of death to England as well. And so, you know, Israel is once again acting alone to do the world's dirty work for it.
And is Israel confident that their defence systems will be able to withstand whatever Iran sort of chucks at them, if you like?
Well, Israel is saying now that it took this action because Iran was working to build an arsenal of 20,000 ballistic missiles in just 6 years. And an arsenal like that would definitely overwhelm Israel's missile defenses. So Israel says, our missile defenses are strong. They might not get everything. I'm sure there will be conversations with partners like the RAF, which helped to defend Israel before when the Iranian regime launched ballistic missiles, because we do not want to see mass casualties. But Israel says this is a risk we have to take now, because if we don't, and Iran goes nuclear and has tens of thousands of ballistic missiles, then that is definitely not a threat that we could withstand.
Absolutely. Elon, thank you very much indeed. Elon Levy, the former Israeli government spokesperson, host of Israel State of a Nation podcast. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be going live to London Gatwick Airport to hear from Nick Ellaby, who's our reporter on the scene. He's going to bring us up to date on what's being said there about that awful crash in India yesterday. Also, John Rentoul, chief political commentator, joins us as well. We'll get his view on what a week it's been for the Labour government. Sarah says this: good morning, Mike. I hope you're well. I didn't hear Rachel Thieves mention by what date our own service veterans and homeless people will be housed in government-funded hostels and housing. Did I miss it? I'd rather she didn't even mention stopping illegal immigrants being placed into hotels by 2029. All that does is cause outrage and insult to the British people. One more thing, Mike. I actually shouted, stop saying that, at the TV when she mentioned the infamous and totally fabricated £22 billion black hole. I'm just sick of it all, Mike. Have yourself a lovely weekend and see you for more of the same next week, no doubt. Well, I think that's right. We will be, no doubt, checking out on the government, and only today they're being accused of misleading the public on 3 different levels. 1, Rachel Reeves accused of making up numbers by the Institute for Fiscal Studies. 2, Starmer being accused of actually misusing the money that they got from the VAT on public schools. He says now that they wanted to spend it on housing, which is what they're not doing. And of course, we've got another Labour MP who went to a chip shop but didn't. Put out a tweet saying that she was celebrating National Fish Day by going to a local fish and chip shop. Unfortunately for her, on that day, it was actually shut. We'll tell you all about that coming next, right here after the news on Talk.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got a drought guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you until 10 o'clock. Of course, Alex Phillips will be in then and take you through to 1 o'clock. Of course, lots of breaking news this morning. An Air India flight's been forced to make an emergency landing today after a bomb threat less than 24 hours after the Ahmedabad air disaster. Flight 379 was travelling from Thailand's Phuket to India's capital, New Delhi, but had to suddenly land again after an explosion warning, airport authorities said. The front pages this morning very much full of that story. A picture as well of the sole survivor. An incredible story. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, aged 40, was sitting in seat 11A of that Dreamliner flight 787, the Dreamliner Boeing 787, which lost height shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad Airport in India, smashed into some buildings, and everybody was killed apart from this one man who was seated in 11A. Miracle Brit in seat 11A is what it says on the front page of The Sun and several other newspapers as well. I don't know how I'm alive, it says on the front of the Daily Mail. Quite an incredible story. We'll bring you the latest from Gatwick this morning with Nick Ellaby just very shortly, right here on Talk. Also, overnight there's been some action in the Middle East. The Israelis launched a series of military attacks on Iran, on missile bases, on various ballistic missile units, various other military installations. Retaliation is underway from Iran. They've sent something like 100 drones over into Israel. So far, the Israeli air defense systems are working very well, and none of those drones, I believe, have got through. But of course, we will keep you updated on that. This is likely to go on, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, for several days. They say the reason that the attacks were launched is basically because Iran had been moving closer and closer to forming themselves into a nuclear power with nuclear weapons. They could make as many as 10 nuclear bombs in very short order, according to the American state as well. Donald Trump yesterday saying they can't be allowed to get a nuclear button, they can't be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. It's not happening. Those were his words. And so Israel obviously working not hand in glove with America, but certainly with Trump's knowledge. So we'll bring you the latest on that story, of course, as well. 03444991000 is the number. Domestically, we're going to hear about the police, because the police are now saying that they're so underfunded that they're going to have to ignore some crimes, like theft, like shoplifting, like somebody having their phone stolen. Well, I'm sorry, they pretty much ignore it already, don't they? I mean, who in their right mind has ever seen a police officer chasing a phone thief? Nobody does. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Rich says this, Mike, Israel demonstrated it can have nukes responsibly. The rest of the Middle East cannot. Israel will nuke Iran if there's any chance of a viable device. They cannot be trusted. Kevin says there is a stark difference between the reporting of Iran's attack on Israel. All are reporting that Iran launched drones after Israel's attacks. If it were reversed and Israel responded to an Iranian attack, there would be no mention of the initial attack. The world has double standards when reporting about Israel. I'm not sure that's entirely true. But let's go now to Nick Ellaby, talks reporter down at Gatwick, because the plane yesterday that crashed in India, the Air India Dreamliner 787, with some 260 people on board, crashed as it was taking off. It couldn't seem to get up in the air. The footage has been very disturbing for all to see. You can see it there. The plane looks as though it's actually coming into land, but it was trying to take off, and seemingly they just couldn't get any thrust. They couldn't get up in the air. The wheels were down, and then there was this horrible fireball, and everybody was killed, including some people on the ground, aside from one man. The plane was due to land at Gatwick some hours later, of course. Nick, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I'm imagining it must be a pretty sombre mood down at Gatwick today. Obviously, that plane due to land presumably late yesterday. What are you hearing? What are you seeing?
In terms of the families of the people who were expecting to welcome their loved ones and friends off that Air India flight A171, it was supposed to arrive here at Gatwick at 6:25 p.m. UK time last night. There is a crisis centre that's been set up for family members. We understand some of them are being supported. I'm not sure how many. I've been in touch with the Gatwick media teams who haven't provided that information yet, but put a request in to find out exactly what's going on. Press, there's a number of press here again this morning. In terms of the mood at Gatwick, Mike, we've had quite a lot of passengers, I think, probably have slightly heightened concerns about flying. We've had a few people come up to us and ask us what's happened or what we're talking about today, and sort of, you know, say that they're maybe thinking twice about getting on a plane. But apart from that, really, it's actually kind of business as usual. Ahmedabad Airport reopened just a few hours after the crash yesterday evening. The crash, which came down in a residential district of Megani Nagar, just close to the airport, didn't affect any of Ahmedabad Airport. So interestingly, and perhaps shockingly for some people, that airport was reopened very, very quickly. Here at Gatwick, it was only an Air India flight to Goa last night that was supposed to take off late last night that was cancelled. But in terms of the rest of the flights, there's not a huge knock-on effect to the schedule. And then you mentioned the story, incredible. I mean, it's like something out of a Hollywood film, isn't it? Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, a man from Leicester, walked away. There's video footage of him just in Ahmedabad walking away from the crash. We understand from an interview with Sky News, his brother was spoken to, Nayan, in Leicester yesterday evening. He told them that his father had received a call from Vishwash when he was on the runways and just about to take off, and then literally 2 minutes later a video call with his bloodied face saying, I'm here, I've walked away from the crash, there are bodies everywhere, I don't know how I'm alive. You mentioned at the top that Vishwash was sat in seat 11A next to the emergency exit. Tragically, we understand his brother was sat next to him. There's been no news at all about his brother, and we understand that Vishwash was the only survivor out of 242 people on board, some 53 British nationals, 169 Indian nationals, 1 Canadian and 7 Portuguese nationals. We know that the conglomerate that controls Air India, Tata Sons, have offered £86,000 compensation to the family of each person killed in the crash. They're also offering to pay anybody's medical expenses as a result of that. There are lots of people injured on the ground. We know that at least some 200 to 240 bodies have been recovered from that site. That's people who were on the plane and also people who were on the ground. It was a doctor's hostel that the plane landed into. And then the UK Foreign Office have crisis teams both here in London and out in Ahmedabad working with people. People who are wanting to get a hold of any information are told to contact the British Foreign Office, or in Air India themselves also have a number, and that can be found on Gatwick's social media streams.
Yes, and an incredible story, not just because of the fact that he survived the crash itself, but that people say that he might have had to also walk down some flights of stairs in the motel, or the hostel rather, that the plane appeared to land on, which could have been on fire. And seeing him walking there, it's almost unbelievable, isn't it? Because he doesn't even appear to be terribly badly injured.
It's incredible, Mike. I mean, really, we had that because it was obviously the drama of the visual drama of this story of an aircraft coming down like that in a ball of flames. And then we had the Ahmedabad City Police Commissioner, G.S. Malik, quite quickly afterwards coming out to the press and saying that he believed there were no survivors from the air crash. And then very shortly afterwards, the news that one British man was filmed walking away. We understand he has some impact injuries to his chest, to his eyes and his feet. There is a photograph of his face, looks quite badly scratched, but you know, compared to what he's been through, remarkable that he was able just to walk away from that. And these stories about aviation disasters, they always hit home, don't they? Because we always think there, but for the grace of God go I, and Vishwas Kumar Ramesh must be feeling that 100-fold today.
Yeah, absolutely right. Nick, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Nick Ellaby, talks reporter down there at Gatwick today, saying that quite a few people are nervous, as people always are after an incident like this, a disaster in the air. A bit more breaking news for the Indian government is considering grounding Air India's Boeing 787 fleet. And you'd have to say, if there is a Boeing 787 taking off anywhere, obviously people are going to be watching it very carefully to see whether there is any problem with the actual aircraft. I mean, so far up until now, the Dreamliner has never had an accident. So this is the first one, but it's a pretty catastrophic one, of course, and we'll talk some more about that coming up a little bit later in the show. Right now, though, John Rentoul is here, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent. John, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I thought you're the perfect man to look back on this week of Labour government, the spending review. Keir Starmer's interviewing the New Statesman, you know, more sort of lies being told by members of the government, or at least people accusing them of telling untruths about various things.
I'm glad you corrected yourself there, Mike.
Well, they are telling lies. I mean, Keir Starmer said that he collected the money from the VAT on private schools to put to the housing budget, which, in fact, Rachel Reeves completely and utterly contradicted the previous day.
Yeah, no, that was a foolish.
So that one is a lie. I mean, why would he do that? I mean, surely there should be somebody now asking questions about who's actually controlling his Twitter account, because it gets more ridiculous by the day.
Well, I think he's making the broader point that the critics of the government, and that includes Kemi Badenoch this morning, saying she wants to scrap the oil and gas levy. They always come up with these criticisms, but they never say how they're going to pay for it.
Well, that's the problem. But you know, she said in fact, I can play you the clip. She said exactly what they did with the VAT that they collected. Have a look at this.
That is why at the budget last autumn, I ended the tax loophole which exempted private schools from VAT and business rates. And I put that money where it belongs, into helping the 93% of children in our state schools.
So that's basically her saying, well, we've done it. Well, they said they were going to hire 6,500 teachers. They said it was going to be putting money into the state system, which they wanted to do because they were taking money off the toffs who can afford to send their kids to rich and expensive schools. So why would he bother putting out a tweet to say, this is why we've been able to build some more houses?
Well, because, as I say, he was just making the general point. And, you know, there's no hypothecation in the tax system. I mean, that money, there isn't a sort of limited amount of money which you could follow and say that pound that came from VAT on school fees has gone to this school here.
Well, no, but that's what she said.
It all goes into the general pot, and you know what the point that the Prime Minister was making, the perfectly reasonable one, which is they've raised taxes and they've increased spending on public services generally.
Well, they have, yeah, but when the Chancellor of the Exchequer I'm just trying to make the point of again, it's the kind of the disconnection going on. If the Chancellor of the Exchequer makes a point in the spending review that this is what's happened to the money, we put it back into the school system, we put it into the education system, then why tweet that something else has happened to it? And I know what you're saying, I understand that, but the impression given is that he's saying that money's now helping to build more houses, which it isn't.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's a communications mess up.
It is, but don't you think? I mean, I don't know. You may not know. I don't know who runs his Twitter account, but I mean, there are a continuing series of statements that he makes on his Twitter account, which are clearly not true.
Well, I'm not sure that's right, Mike, but. It is a very strange account. It keeps on issuing these Labour slogans, in a constant stream, and there's no real connection between them. And I think that's one of the criticisms that does stick to this government, is that it doesn't have a very consistent message.
I mean, well, let's just have a look. You know, this from yesterday. Keir Starmer: last autumn we fixed the foundations. This week we showed Britain we will rebuild. Well, you know, last autumn they didn't fix the foundations. Last autumn they had a budget which caused 275,000 people to lose their jobs.
Well, no, it also raised taxes in order to pay for public services.
Yeah,
and to fill the hole left by the Conservative government.
Well,
So, yes,
you can say
did
that,
fix the
but they didn't fix any foundations, did they?
No, they filled a hole that was left to them by the Conservative government,
which the OBR has said wasn't actually a £22 billion black hole at all. So they keep
no, it's bigger than that, actually, Mike, because they ended up putting up.
Yeah, but it's not as big as it is now.
No, it was. I mean, no. The point is, they put up taxes by 25 billion in order to spend more on public services, and that was what the people voted for in the general election.
But they've also borrowed an awful lot of money, John. So the black hole surely is getting bigger. It's not getting smaller, is it? They borrowed 20 billion in April alone.
Yeah, well, the borrowing figures are alarming, and she's going to have to put taxes up again in the autumn, which I think is going to upset a lot of people.
Well, exactly right, because it's also going to upset Rachel Reeves, isn't it? I mean, we've had conversations with you about this before, and I think you've now come around to the idea that she might not last. Have you? Or have you frozen? Has John Rentoul frozen? That's right, John Rentoul's frozen. We'll come back to John Rentoul in a minute. Yeah, I mean, here's the problem with Rachel Reeves and her continuing belief that actually everything seems to be going terribly swimmingly. I think he's back. John, are you back?
I'm back. Yes.
Sorry, you seem to freeze.
I didn't freeze. You froze, Mike.
Oh, I froze. Oh, okay. I didn't realise I was frozen because I was still moving and talking. Did you hear the question?
So was I.
The question was, I think you might be coming around to the idea that Rachel Reeves is not long for this world. Is she?
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's right. Actually, I don't know who would replace her.
Well, I'm not sure who would replace her either, but you know, she's not doing a very good job, is she? I mean, generally speaking, she's not particularly well liked in her own party at this point, is she?
Well, I thought what was interesting about the spending review was that she did appear to be pleading with Labour MPs in particular to give her a break and to support her, because you're absolutely right. She's incredibly unpopular in the country, and what was fascinating about there was a survey of Labour Party members at the end of last month, which suggested that she was bottom of the league table of cabinet ministers in popularity.
Yes,
absolutely extraordinary to have your Chancellor at the bottom of the list. But I mean, Keir Starmer was well down on that list as well. I mean, the government as a whole is unpopular and in trouble. And I think she tried to sort of pull some of that back in the spending review, and I think, judging by the response from some Labour MPs, she half succeeded. I mean, I think she made a reasonable fist of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she made a reasonable fist of it, but nobody believes the numbers. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that the numbers have all been sort of cooked up and messed around with, and she's using some old Tory numbers, some she does like, some she doesn't like, and the numbers just don't really add up, unfortunately.
They really don't, and that's why taxes are going to have to go up in the autumn, and that's the one thing that she and Keir Starmer will not say. I mean, she had some very strange form of words, which is, that there's nothing in the spending review that requires taxes to rise in the autumn, but there's plenty outside the spending review that means the public finances are in a far worse state than they were in just March.
Well, exactly right. So the economy is not going well. I mean, only yesterday we learned that the GDP was dropped down 0.3%. So she's not growing the economy, even though they said that they could pay back the pensioners' fuel allowance, because now the economy is doing better than it was, when it actually isn't.
Now, there I would agree with you, Mike. That was a statement which was flatly untrue.
Yeah.
I mean, the argument that they ought to be making is that they've managed to fix the hole that was left to them by the Tories. They realised that they went a bit too far on their winter fuel payment, and that was a mistake. And so they're going to reverse it, but they still haven't said how they're going to pay for that. So
no. But they haven't. But they won't admit it's a mistake, and that's part of the problem. Why don't they just say it was a mistake?
They ought to just say, sorry, we got it wrong.
Yeah. But they won't say that, instead of which, and she sort of hamstrung herself now by saying, oh no, we were able to do it now because we fixed the foundations and fixed the economy. And we've got, for example, Jonathan Reynolds claiming today that there's a trade deal imminent with the US. Well, for weeks we've been told they've already got a trade deal with the US, so either they have one or they haven't, surely.
No, well, it hasn't. No, they've signed the general principles, so they haven't. It hasn't been implemented, and that's what he was talking about.
Well, there's no detail because they haven't actually got a deal yet.
No, they've got no. Well, it depends what you mean by a deal. They've agreed the terms of the deal. It hasn't actually been implemented yet, and they haven't agreed.
Well, they're still arguing about steel, aren't they? They're still arguing about the tariffs on steel, and they're still arguing about tariffs on cars because I'm told that the tariffs on steel are still there, and the tariffs on cars.
Well, they are still there, but the Americans
so they haven't got a deal.
No, but the agreement has been reached. It's just a question of implementing.
Right. But that's like saying I've bought a house, but all you've actually done is agreed to buy a house, but you haven't actually bought it yet.
Well, it's like the different. Yes, it's like exchange and completion, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's a lot of things that can happen in between, and sometimes you don't end up completing, so you haven't actually bought a house until you bought it.
Well, that is absolutely true.
I mean, you can't really argue with that. I mean, the other one is the Chagos Islands. Every single time he gets up to speak about it, Keir Starmer says China's very much against this agreement and against this deal, when China actually came out and said, we welcome it.
Yeah, I think he's trolling you, Mike.
I think he is.
I think he's trying to wind up the opposition because he deliberately mentions China every time.
Yeah,
even though
but it's wrong. But it's wrong, though. Don't you think the Prime Minister ought to have a slightly better grasp of reality?
No, I think what he's saying is that the deal we have done it stops China's interest in expanding its influence in the area, and therefore whatever they say in public, they don't really like it.
No, but his words are they're against the deal. He doesn't say.
Well, I think they have formally opposed it, haven't they?
No, they haven't. No, they actually came out and said they welcomed it. They've actually physically said that. You can argue that they didn't say that in private, but the point is, he says Russia are against it, China are against it, Reform are against it. You know, that's what he says, but it's wrong.
Well, he's extrapolating. He's interpreting what the Chinese really mean.
Or you could call it lying. Steve has sent me a tweet, which I'm going to read to you. He says, can you please ask John Renton if he thinks it's great that the Mauritians now have zero income tax at the expense of the British public, and whether he feels we should support the rest of the world financially?
Well, no, I think this is a terrible deal. I'm afraid I agree with you. I mean, I think there's an awful lot of hyperbole, and I think a lot of the figures that are bandied about are absolute nonsense. I mean, for Kemi Badenoch to talk about £30 billion is absolutely absurd. But I mean, because the truth is bad enough. We are paying £165 million a year for something like 28 years or something. Of the first 28 years of a 100-year lease. It is appalling, but it's not £30 billion.
No, it's a terrible state of affairs. The other big story, of course, this week was the new appointment of a new chairman for Reform, David Bull. I think we've got a clip here for you.
So when I was doing Most Haunted Live, which was an extraordinary, it was the world's largest live ghost hunt, by the way, and we had all of these people watching, but when we came off air, some things happened that I cannot explain. So, for example, I was driving through a wood and it was pouring with rain, and I knew someone was in my car. So I stopped the car in the middle of the wood, got into the boot, opened the boot, couldn't find anyway, got back into the car, drove really fast to the hotel. Derek Okora, who was the paranormal medium at that time, came up to me in the bar and said, "You didn't come here on your own, did you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Your grandmother is with you." So I was like, OK. And then he changed facially. He started to channel her, that's what he said. And then he jumped on me and tried to strangle me. And I'm not kidding, I had bouncers in those days, and they pulled the bouncers off me. And then I went to bed. The next day I said, would you like to explain why you tried to kill me overnight? And he said, well, when I was talking to your grandmother, it was then hijacked by another evil spirit.
So it's going to be an interesting year, isn't it?
That is the most extraordinary clip. I've been interviewed by David Bull several times.
Yeah. He's a very popular talk host. In fact, he's not doing it anymore. People are really upset that he's not going to be doing it anymore.
No, that's right. I mean, in many ways, he's a much better fit for that job than Zia Yusuf, because he's much more sort of outgoing and cheerful and.
And funnily enough, I mean, I've been talking to some reform people about it, and none of them, I mean, unlike most political parties where they go, crikey, why is he talking about ghosts on national television? But he did manage to sort of completely confound Susanna Reid, who really didn't know what to say, because she'd been sort of giving him quite a hard interview up until that moment, and she kind of lost it. She was like, I don't know what to do now. But they're quite happy with it, because it makes him look like quite an interesting character.
Well, well, that's one word. That's one word for it, Mike. I mean...
Well, yeah, but not because one of the reasons that people have fallen out of love with politics is because they see these kind of automaton-like figures who don't appear to be very human and don't appear to have anything interesting to say. And I think that's part of their disenchantment with them.
Well, OK, David Bull is certainly human, and he has interesting, if wacky things to say.
All right, we should leave it at that. Thank you very much indeed. John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent. Have a great weekend. It's 8:26.
An Air India jet that was reported to have been heading to Gatwick Airport in London, so highly likely that there would have been Brits on board. The plane's final signal was received just seconds after takeoff. The aircraft was lost at 10:08 a.m. local time, less than a minute after takeoff. It had reached 625 feet, and it fell just outside the airport. It had just taken off from Ahmedabad's airport perimeter. The Aviation Minister for India has said they are on the highest alert, and rescue teams have been mobilised.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:28. I'm Mike Graham. This one from Alison, who says, 2 police officers turned up at my vet's at 10 p.m. with an owned deceased cat for cremation. Can't turn up for burglaries, but wasted an hour sorting out cremation for a member of the public. I wanted to say, haven't you got crimes to solve? Easy shift for them. Hi, Mike. 3 lies in one day from Labour, not even telling the truth about going to a chip shop. This lot can't even lie straight in bed. What a disgrace, says Dan from Tunbridge. Let's talk now to Paul Embry, trade unionist and writer. Before that, though, a voice note from Phil.
Hi, Mike. So the police are underfunded, are they? I was in Stokesay last week for the Tour de Britain bicycle race. There was 50 police bikes, 10 ambulances, and about 8 police cars for 50 cyclists or so. Underfunded, eh?
Well, they do always come out, don't they, it seems, when they need to. But the fact that they can't investigate people having their phones stolen or people having their shop raided and shoplifters doing whatever they want, I don't understand why they don't have enough money to do that. Let's talk to Paul Embry, though, trade unionist and writer, because there's been some trouble over in Northern Ireland, which has been, going on, I suppose, for most of this week. It's a sort of a riot which is going on nightly, where people are getting houses getting burned down, and community centres getting burned down. It's all because of 2 teenagers who've been arrested, supposedly for charged with a sexual assault of another teenager, and they're all from Romania, and so the locals have taken it upon themselves to demonstrate, basically. And there was also a bit of trouble in Salford last night, so we thought we should ask Paul what he made of it all. Paul, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, there's a lot of people worried about what might come this summer in terms of, a kind of summer of discontent. We're going to have the hottest day of the year, I think, so far today in the southeast. It's going to, the combination of sort of hot weather, police not exactly being the most loved people in the world at the moment, and a lot of sort of what you might call youth who haven't got much better to do.
Yeah, and I think the first thing to say is, look, some of the violence has been appalling and indefensible and mindless. And from some of the scenes that I've seen in Ballymena of innocent people having their property set on fire, some of the perpetrators deserve to go to jail, in my view, for a very long time. So it's important to make that clear. But I think beyond that, it's certainly true that there is a great deal of simmering tension out there, whether it's in Northern Ireland, whether it's in some of the provinces of Britain, what you might call some of our post-industrial areas. And much of that tension is not driven by racism or by any kind of desire to commit mindless violence. It comes about because people in many of those communities, some of our tougher, grittier communities, feel genuinely that the country is broken, that the country isn't working for them, that the economy is broken. They can't get on the housing ladder. Public services are crumbling. Real wages are falling. The government, successive governments have lost control of borders. We've got real problems over integration in our communities, massive cultural transformation. And that is not going to go away. And I feel that resentment is going to build and build.
Yeah, I feel that there's a sense, a bit like the 1970s, when you might not remember them as well as I do, but there were some similar kind of problems then. But people have said to me, back then, yeah, there were problems, but we didn't have the sort of the multicultural problem that we have now. And you do get a sense that people are getting more and more fed up with it, like with every passing day.
Well, I sense that there is a real phenomenon in our country of social disintegration going on, where actually, we have politicians constantly tell us how united we are, constantly tell us that diversity is our strength. And it's pretty clear if you ever go to some of these, particularly these working class communities beyond the M25, you see really how unintegrated we are. And I'm not suggesting that these communities are necessarily at each other's throats all the time, but they rarely interact. And I think social solidarity, which is, very important aspects of a high trust society, is slowly eroding. And my fear, Mike, is that we end up becoming something like Lebanon. We see the slow Lebanonization of our country, where a previously stable and secure country becomes divided upon ethnic, religious and cultural lines, with each community almost retreating, to itself. And people not interacting. We are disintegrating in that way. And I don't say that process is going to happen overnight, but I think there's a sense that it is slowly happening, and it's really not healthy.
And do you really think it's that serious?
I don't necessarily say that communities are powder kegs that are just waiting to erupt. I just think there is a simmering resentment, and unless the government very quickly gets growth into the economy so people start feeling better off, unless they show that they've got a strategy for integrating the very large numbers of people that have come here, which successive governments have been dreadful at, unless they show that they can get immigration numbers sharply reduced, unless they've got a strategy for rebuilding some of the social solidarity that has been lost, and getting public services working, reducing NHS housing waiting lists, getting the housing crisis sorted, then I don't see how that resentment is going to go away. Professor David Betts, an esteemed professor in modern war, has suggested that he thinks that we're on the way to civil war in this country in some, because a previously dominant social majority, as he describes it, feels like it's losing its place in society. And we've got this thing called asymmetrical multiculturalism, where, if you like, the native population are told to suppress and never celebrate their own culture, but are told they constantly have to celebrate other cultures. Now, I don't necessarily say it's as serious as that, but I do think that there is a real divide in our country, which is not closing and is, I think, slowly getting worse. I think most people can see that.
I think most people can see it, and that's what is worrying to people. And also, you know, this business that came out earlier this week about Angela Rayner decriminalising being homeless. You know, at first glance, people thought, is that something to do with, you know, not arresting people who are, you know, who are vagrants and causing problems and all that? But lots of people have interpreted it as this could basically make it possible for a lot of tented cities to grow up. And these might be tented cities full of all manner of people, including some of the people that we now see camping out in the middle of London. You know, in the middle of Park Lane, you've got like a tented city of a sort of Roma community who spend most of their days begging on the streets of London and then go and sleep under tents in the middle of a road.
Well, look, I mean, I think homelessness is a real problem in our society, and you know, it tugs on my heartstrings whenever I see somebody sleeping rough, particularly.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that in parts of America, for example, in California, in Los Angeles, particularly in New York, and a lot of the Democrat-controlled cities, there are so many homeless people that they've literally taken over streets. You know.
Yeah, and I get that, and it's not a pleasant thing to experience. It's not a pleasant thing when that happens to, you know, to the community that you're in. And I understand completely that people say, look, this shouldn't be allowed. There needs to be a proper strategy for making sure that everybody has got a roof over their head. And I'm not particularly in favour of what Rayner is trying to do. I don't think that's necessarily going to address the question. I think more widely, there is a general sense that there is a growing lawlessness on our streets, whether it's begging, whether it's petty crime, whether it's people evading their fares on public transport, and that the police and the courts are just not addressing that. They're not deterring crime, they're not punishing it. And you know, you saw Robert Jenrick's video where he highlighted a phenomenon that those of us who have lived and worked in London for many years will know exactly that this sort of thing is going on, and the authorities largely turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the you know, I think there's a sense among people that the police and the courts have got their priorities all wrong, and they often concentrate on things like people putting offensive words online.
Right.
They devote a lot of resources to that, whereas the real crime that blights our communities and affects people's lives, they are pretty useless at dealing with.
Well, they are, and we get this morning a piece in the Times saying that their funding shortfall is going to force them to go soft on theft. And I mean, I couldn't quite believe my eyes when I was reading this. They say they're going to have they're going to have sort of less priorities on things like shoplifting and phone theft. There'll be fewer officers patrolling parks and attending schools. Well, you know, I can't remember the last time the police actually tried to catch anybody who stole a phone. 1,000 phones are getting stolen a week in London. I think it may be 2,000 now. And also shoplifting has become something that if you can't stop shoplifters in your own shop, then the police aren't going to help you.
And, you know, criminals are not stupid. They might be immoral, but they're not necessarily stupid. They know, in most cases, that they will get away with it, even if they're filmed online and it's put on social media. Most of the time, they know that the shop staff, if they're shoplifting, or the station assistants, if they're evading their fare, are not going to lay a finger on them and are not going to apprehend them. And even if they are caught by the police, in the unlikely event, they're probably never going to see a court, and they're probably not going to be punished in any serious way. And what that does, it provides an incentive to just do more and more. And I'm a believer that in the kind of zero tolerance approach, if you nip it in the bud very quickly and you punish very quickly, I believe people should be given second chances in life, but if you punish quickly, you're then disincentivizing people from doing the same thing again. But in our country, unfortunately, that's not happening. They just get away with it time.
No. And also the problem with the prisons, I mean, we could talk about this all day, Paul. I mean, I know you've probably got to go and do something else, but you know, the prison system is constructed in such a way that you're very unlikely to go to prison. Even if you do get caught by the police for doing something that they're very unlikely to catch you for doing, the chances of you going to prison are practically zero.
Yeah, and again, the same thing. Criminals understand that. They know that you will have to essentially turn into a habitual criminal before you see the inside of a prison cell. And by that point, it's almost ingrained in you. And, you know, as I say, if we had a system, a sensible system, where the state intervened swiftly and forcefully, and I'm not, as I say, I'm not a hang 'em and flog 'em person. I believe that people should be given second chances in life, but you need to disincentivize people from believing that they can simply continue to commit crime and get away with it, and it will be, you know, their 15th, 16th, 17th offence before anybody intervenes, or before they're ever likely to see the inside of a prison cell. By then, they are regular criminals, and it's very difficult to shake them from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Paul Embry, trade unionist and writer, talking about his worries about the way that Britain is actually going. It's funny, Deanna Davidson was in here for the first hour of the show looking at the stories in the papers, and she actually said, oh, it's great to be back in Britain. She now lives in Brazil. And I said, yeah, it's always when you live abroad that you kind of appreciate the country that you live in, or that you used to live in, kind of more than the people that live here. Because we sit here pretty much every day going, what on earth has happened to Britain? 38,454 is the number on the migrant tracker this morning. That's, of course, the broken borders problem that we've got. That's since Labour government got in almost a year ago. We'll be celebrating their annual, their first annual birthday, if you like, very shortly. July the 4th was when they got voted in. Hard to believe they've been in a year and done so much damage. Colin in London says this: Taronsay is a deserted Scottish island of 14.9 square kilometres. Why not build low-cost, quick assembly, temporary accommodation there to house the illegals, empty the hotels and use the existing housing stock for British citizens? Doesn't seem like a bad idea, does it? Mike Starmer keeps saying Liz Truss crashed the economy. Hasn't he crashed the country? Yes, absolutely right. This is Morning Glory. Back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:43. I'm Mike Graham with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. This is the home of common sense. Andy from Doncaster says, Trump is correct. Iran must not be allowed to create a nuclear weapon, just as Iraq was not allowed to create a nuclear capability. 7th of June, 1981. Israel conducted Operation Opera, attacking and destroying Iraq's nuclear facilities just days before it was to be commissioned. Well, that's right, and Elon Levy actually said that, didn't he? Steve says, Nigel Farage, when interviewed, said it would be impossible to deport thousands of migrants from here. Yeah, his mate Trump seems to have the right idea. Maybe he should ask his advice, as this is what many reform supporters would vote them in for. I think what Nigel Farage said was he couldn't deport absolutely everybody, hundreds of thousands of people, because it wasn't practical. And I think, you know, from that point of view, he's right. We're going to talk to Joe Wheeler now, the meteorologist at Square a Raindrop, because apparently Yorkshire is already in drought. following one of the dry springs on record. Well, you say that, but I'm looking at a picture in the paper today from Plymouth where a bus appears to be practically underwater from a flood. So I guess it just depends where you live. Joe, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Well, yes, things are changing a little bit this weekend as well. And just a quick warning for the southeast. There is a yellow warning tonight where we could see up to 2 inches of rain delivered in short order, with some very potent thunderstorms as well. So the fact that we're talking about drought is understandable, but obviously on a weekend when we've got a lot of weather warnings for thunderstorms, but then we get high pressure building back in. So I think it is a very salient point. We did have a very dry, very sunny spring, 4 more hours sunshine than 2020, which is quite impressive.
Nice.
But rainfall totals did alter across the country. Parts of the northeast only saw around 5 millimetres of rain, whereas down in the southwest, Devon and Cornwall saw something like 239% of their rainfall. So it was very, very damp there. Just an awful lot drier elsewhere.
Yes.
And that was largely down to this large blocking high that we had. And you've got to understand that when we have something like that sitting across the country, it's stopping the rain getting to us or limiting its progress across the country. The rainfall is still there, but when there's a big blocking high in the way, that rain has either got to go south or it's got to go north. And this year it's mostly gone south, so southern parts of Europe have had some shocking weather.
Well, that's right. And I mean, the thing is, we were saying sort of laughingly just a couple of weeks ago, no doubt there'll be a hosepipe ban soon, you know, no doubt there'll be a drought declared. And of course, this one's been declared by the Environment Agency, who say that it's been unusually dry in Yorkshire. But I guess, you know, part of the problem in this country has been for a long time, we've talked about it, haven't we, with this new government saying they're going to build 2 new reservoirs, possibly. I don't know how long it's going to take for that to happen. But we haven't really been building reservoirs. We don't have any way of collecting the water, really, do we?
No, and I think that is going to be, you know, important going forward. Not only have we had a very sunny spring, we've had a very warm start to summer. And as I say, high pressure building back in is going to settle the weather down again for us for much of the rest of the month. So more dry weather to come. Trying to look further ahead than that is silly, but I think you have to expect over the summer that we will see more settled conditions and drier conditions too.
Yeah. And so, I mean, how soon before the rest of the country gets put into a drought situation? We all get told not to wash the car and, you know, shower with a friend and all the usual nonsense.
Well, there is a difference between the high pressure we'll see at the end of June than the one that we saw across the spring, which was a blocking high. Literally, that wasn't going anywhere. It was just going to sit there, yeah, and keep things not moving at all. The ones that we're going to see over the next couple of weeks, they're slightly different. They'll kind of grow and then diminish, subside, move around a little bit. So every single time an area of high pressure moves around like that, it lets some rain into, say, parts of Scotland, down towards the southwest. I think you think back to, was it 95 or 96? Tremendous heat wave for central, southern, eastern areas. But throughout all of that, Scotland and Northern Ireland had so much rain because it was just held there. And so it just kept raining on them, whereas the rest of the country was just luxuriating in the sunshine.
I know. I always get told off when I come out and say, oh, it's such a brilliant day down here. It's fantastic. The sun's shining. It's going to be really hot. And I always get a message from somewhere, whether it's Scotland or the Peak District or the Lake District or somewhere in Northern Ireland, where they go, well, it's not like that here. So, you know, I mean, Britain is just a very diverse country when it comes to weather, isn't it? It's nice. Diversity is our strength in weather.
Exactly. Well, north to south, east to west, and where we've got little mountain ranges, you know, that changes the weather all the time. But as I say, ask anybody who took an early holiday to Spain or Portugal or Italy, and they'll tell you there was some torrential rain, and of course the floods that were featured in the news. And that goes on over the next few days, as I say, with high pressure across Britain and Ireland. Then parts of Spain and France are looking at some really big thunderstorms and heavy rain, which is unusual at this time of year.
Absolutely. Well, I'm prepared for anything. I was in Dubai recently and they had a heat wave when I was there, and I was like, oh, great. How hot is it actually going to be? 50 degrees in the desert, they said. And, you know, nobody died, as they say. It was fine. It was nice. Anyway, have a lovely weekend. Joe Wheeler, thank you very much indeed, meteorologist at Square a Raindrop. So there's going to be a lot of thunderstorms coming, but it's going to be very hot today. Please don't tell me it's not going to be hot where you are. I suspect it may not be. But they've already put a drought warning into Yorkshire, basically saying the declaration does not immediately change the situation for customers, but we are warning that temporary restrictions on water usage could be introduced if there is no significant rainfall. Well, as I've often said in the past, if these water companies and the Environment Agency want us to stop using water, maybe they could stop leaking it all into the bleeding ground. Maybe that would be helpful. Let's get a voice note from Kelvin.
I think the country's had enough of listening to Labour. Labour are nothing but lies, 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 lies. And every opportunity they get, they try and slate the Reform Party, saying, oh, the country will be in a right state if they get into power. Well, the Reform Party, at least all of them have run businesses and know what it's like to run a business, whereas these cabbages you've got in Parliament now, not one has ever run a business.
No.
So, you know, they just keep lying. 22 billion black hole was part of a black hole that they left last time they were in power for 15 years, if you remember that, and then Gordon Clown sold all the gold off dirt cheap, you know, so they inherited a 22 billion black hole, which was part of their problem in the first place.
Absolutely right. Well said, Kelvin. I think a lot of people would agree with that. They are crashing the economy. It's as simple as that. They're not in charge of it. Dan Hodges is coming up in the next hour. Even he's pretty much had enough, and he's just not really willing to endorse them anymore. How about this from Julian Knott? She says, morning, Mike. Can you tell me if I've missed two-tier Keir commenting on the riots in Northern Ireland? Has he said the swift arm of the law will come down on them, as in Southport? If not, why not? Does he think he's the only Prime Minister of England and not the United Kingdom? Keep up the most important job you do, keeping me sane. Thank you, Julie. I will do. Yeah, it's a good question, good point, that. He's never actually come out and said anything about the far-right thuggery of what's going on in Northern Ireland, even though there are people there who are saying it. So it's not as if it's a pretty easy win for him to come out and say something about it, isn't it? I wonder why he won't do it. Morning, Mike, says Brian. The ridiculously huge number of small boat immigrants that have come into the country since Labour took office could fill a football stadium. That's a small army of young men of fighting age, or you could say an invasion. Well, I'll tell you what, it can fill more than one football stadium. It can probably fill about 4, depending on the size of the stadium, obviously. But it's about 150,000 who have come in, altogether. Since Labour, it's 34,000. Yeah, that could certainly fill one. Coming up, we're going to be taking your calls, of course. 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can send us a voice note as well. You can reach us on Twitter, @talkTV, and you can text us on 87222. This is Morning Glory.
They can't find the gangs. So we know this hasn't worked. So what they've done today is to imply to us, oh, well, it's a great strategy, it's a good policy, it just needed more money. So they have taken £280 million of our money, British taxpayers' money, just to justify the folly of their ludicrous, ineffective, completely failed policy to smash the gangs. That's what they've done.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. The ridiculously... Oh, we've done that one already. My apologies, I won't do that one. Morning, Mike. Says Clayton in Dartford. When Ange Rayner decriminalises sleeping rough, I'm going to buy a tent and pitch it outside her front gate. Happy days. Well, you could do that if you like. One here from Debbie, who says from Hawley, Mike, if the law is not going to do anything about shoplifting, then the government needs to give businesses the right to protect themselves. It's just going to be lawless otherwise. We need the right to protect ourselves. I think that's absolutely right. You have to stop prosecuting people who fight shoplifters off, because that's what they're going to do. Let's have a look at what's happening in Gibraltar, though, because today there's a story in the Daily Telegraph in which it says Spanish border guards will be able to stop Britons entering Gibraltar because of the new Brexit deal for the Rock. And the government, apparently, in the form of David Lammy, has actually admitted this. Fabian Picardo, Gibraltar's chief minister, denied surrendering any sovereignty to Spain or the EU after the details of the deal came out on Wednesday. Because David Lammy, if you remember, sort of snuck off over to Gibraltar to do the deal with this guy, hoping that nobody would notice, because it was all around the spending review. And he came back to Brussels after that to try and push it through with the EU. Well, yesterday there was an exchange between David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, and Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform, in the House of Commons. Have a look.
Just to probe this question of whether or not Spanish border officials, Foreign Secretary, have an effective veto on the entry of a British citizen from the United Kingdom landing on British sovereign territory in Gibraltar. I just want absolute clarity for everybody, please, in this House. Do Spanish officials have a veto or not? And secondly, could he comment on the dispute resolution mechanism and whether or not there is a regular review clause?
Well, can I say to the honourable gentleman that if he flew into Gibraltar Airport, and there was, and I don't know if he has flown in as I have, and there was an alert. I'm not sure why there might be an alert in the Schengen system, but if there were an alert in the Schengen system, can I reassure him that as he is stopped by the Spanish border guards operating on behalf of the European Union, that he would be handed back to the Gibraltars, where he might feel more comfortable. He would be able to access his rights and the legal system that he certainly feels comfortable with, which is ours, and he would be able to return to the United Kingdom, where no doubt the Spanish would seek to extradite him, and many in this House would be rather pleased.
Yeah, all very funny, Mr. Lammy, but actually the truth is that, yes, the question that Richard Tice asked is, could it be that the Spanish authorities can stop Britons from entering Gibraltar? The answer to that is yes. So, you know, even though David Lammy thinks it's a very funny situation, it's actually quite a serious situation, because what that means is that British people who previously were able to fly to Gibraltar because it's a British sovereign property or, you know, piece of land, can now find themselves not being able to enter it, even though it's British, despite the fact that they have a right to enter it, being British, because the Spanish might stop them. So that sounds to me like it is a change of sovereignty, doesn't it? And so no matter what people say, in fact, we had a guest on yesterday, I think, who I was told later on is very much a sort of Europhile, who said, oh, everything's going to be fine as long as the agreement is what we think it is. Well, it turns out the agreement is not what you think it is, because the agreement says that actually the Spanish control the border, which means if you fly into Gibraltar and you have to be seen by a Spanish immigration official, you can be refused entry for whatever reason and sent back to Britain. Surely that can't be right, can it? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call us. How about this from Julie in Notts? No, sorry, this is from Amanda. The problem with non-integration and illegal immigration is causing such unrest in this country because our historic sense of fair play has been systematically eroded. And I think that's absolutely right. And that is the problem. Because at the end of the day, if you have an unfair system, if you have a two-tier system, some might say, then people are not going to enjoy living here because they're going to feel like they're being passed over for all sorts of reasons. Angela Rayner's constituency is full of migrants and homeless people living in doorways, says Jen in Lancashire. Probably why she wants to decriminalise it. Makes her job easier. Keep up the good work. Well, I do wonder about that. And one here from Rich, who basically says, those lads in Ballymena will riot over a bag of chips. Well, I mean, they're certainly continuing to riot. Coming up in the next hour, we'll give you a taste of what's going on the Sun Letters page. We'll also talk to Richard Holder, the Shadow Paymaster General, and Dan Hodges is going to be here as well, commentator from the Mail on Sunday, who over the course of the last several months, I would say, has come around to my view that this government is not playing with a full deck. And in fact, they are messing up this country in a way which might soon find out, we might find out, is irretrievable. This is Talk. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to a very nearly 3 minutes past 9. We are here, of course. It's Friday the 13th. We're here for you until 10 o'clock when Alex Phillips will be along to give us what's going on with her. Coming up in this hour, Lord McKinley is going to join us. Catherine Porter's here as well to talk about Kemi Badenoch's speech. She's calling for an end to windfall taxes and a ban on new oil licences. But also she's saying the welfare state has got too big and the whole nanny state thing has got too out of control. And everybody really expects the government to now look after them from cradle to grave, and that's not really what people should be doing. People should be a bit more independent. They should be a bit more willing to take responsibility for their own lives. It's effectively what she's been saying. We've got lots of things to talk to you about this morning. Breaking news overnight. If you're just waking up, you should be awake really, but if you're only just waking up, there's been some attacks overnight from Israel. They've hit about 100 targets in Iran, nuclear targets apparently, missile bases, ballistics factories and all manner of military places which they've taken out overnight, and there's been a retaliatory strike already from Iran. They've fired about 100 drones into Israel. That dispute is likely to go on for several days, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. Also this morning, we're talking an awful lot about what's on the front pages, of course, as well, and it's all about the miracle Brit in seat 11A, a man who was on that dreaded Gatwick-bound Boeing 787 Dreamliner that took off from Ahmedabad Airport yesterday and crashed almost immediately because it, for some reason, couldn't get up in the air. He was in seat 11A. His name is Vishwash Kumar Ramesh. He lives in Leicester. He's 40 years old. We heard from Nick Ellaby at Gatwick Airport. His brother was sitting next to him. There's still no sign of him, and he appears to be the only survivor who, incredibly, just walked away from this terrible plane crash and a fireball which killed all 262 people on the plane and several people on the ground as well. Absolutely extraordinary story. John Renton was on in the last hour. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. Very interesting to hear John Rentle say that he couldn't see who would replace Rachel Reeves if she was to go. And I find that interesting because even the most fervent of Labour acolyte like John is there conceding that the talent in the Labour Party is basically zero people deep. That's how much trouble we're in. They've got zero people with any talent. Brilliant.
Yeah, net zero talent, I'm afraid you'd have to say. We'll be talking about net zero coming up. Richard Holden MP, the Shadow Paymaster General, is here. Dan Hodges, of course, as well. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Brian says this: good morning, Mike. If Rachel from Accounts has lied about the figures, has she misled the House of Commons? And if so, should she go? Good question. Tony says, morning, Mike. It's quite simple, really. How does Labour get away on video blatantly saying one thing, blatantly lying, and no one seems to be holding them to account? Anyone else would be fired, surely. Absolutely right. Sue from Chelmsford, according to Starmer, we're on a war footing. Maybe Starmer could recruit the smuggling gangs. They seem to know how to invade a country. Well, absolutely right. And what Starmer, of course, has said this morning about the situation in Israel and Iran, the reports of these strikes are concerning, and we urge all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. Escalation serves no one in the region. I very much doubt that Netanyahu or anybody else will take much notice of that. But let's talk now to Richard Holden MP, Shadow Paymaster General. He's down in Westminster for us. Richard, very good morning to you. Oh, he can't hear us. We will come back to him. So we're going to talk, obviously, about the fallout from Rachel Reeves' spending review, because already this morning it looks as though, we mentioned this yesterday on the show, the Institute for Fiscal Studies has basically said that an awful lot of the numbers that Rachel Reeves used in her spending review to justify the spending that she was going to do and to justify the borrowing that she's doing are basically made up. An Institute for Fiscal Studies is a pretty well-respected organisation, and one, I think, which everybody would agree has got it right, because the problem with Rachel Reeves is that she doesn't really have any qualification to do what she's doing. She doesn't have any qualification to be, if you might remember, all the way back to when she faked her own CV and claimed that she worked at the Bank of England for a lot longer than she did, when she also claimed that she worked in what was described as a sort of banking role, when it turned out she worked in a kind of, complaints department role. Making up numbers. She's used to making things up because she made up her CV. I think we've got Richard Holden back. Richard, very good morning to you.
Hello there, Mike. How are you doing? Sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties over here on College Green.
Listen, these things happen, but at least you haven't got that idiot standing behind you like you normally do, so hopefully he's not there. I was just saying, Rachel Reeves accused of making up the figures by the Institute for Fiscal Studies. It's not that surprising, given that she makes everything else up.
Well, you're quite right, Mike. I think we've discussed in the past her sort of dodgy CV that she's constantly changing, depending on who she's talking to. Look, it's quite clear here that we've got a real problem from the Labour government. They're in this sort of death spiral by which they put up taxes, which reduces growth, which means that they've got to borrow more money, which means that the amount of interest they're going to pay on the borrowing goes up, which means they're going to raise taxes, and it just goes round and round and round in a circle. And I'm convinced now that what Rachel Reeves is going to have to do is come back, despite pledging not to. She's going to come back later this year and say we're going to have to raise taxes again. We just saw a couple of days ago Actually, the economic numbers for April alone, the economy had contracted by 0.3% in 1 month. And also, we've seen those job numbers, you know, really tanking with, I think, unemployment amongst young people in my constituency up a sixth just since the general election alone.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so many questions since the spending review as well about, you know, the actual real figures of what growth they're trying to make happen. And I mean, I'm probably like you, not one who believes that you can make growth happen from the centre. It's not really the government's job to create growth. It's the government's job to create an environment for companies to do that. But of course, companies aren't doing that because companies are in decline. They're receding rather than advancing, aren't they?
They certainly are, and we're seeing that at the moment right across the place because of things like that national insurance hit. You know, that is really hammering particularly our hospitality sector, particularly our care sector as well. You know, this is affecting both public and private sector. I've even got schools coming to me at the moment saying they're going to have to lay off support staff because of Labour's national insurance rise. Are you getting to a situation where the private sector are being hammered, the public sector are being hammered? You know, what is going to be left after this Labour government leave office? I think we need to get back to a situation where we're actually creating jobs and growth in the UK. So one of the good things today I'm seeing from Kemi Badenoch up there in Scotland, you know, demanding that we start to drill again in the North Sea.
Yeah.
You know, those really important jobs up there. 200,000 jobs supported in Aberdeenshire in the North Sea. And it's really important, I think, that we should be producing our own oil and gas for security reasons. But, you know, it's also great for the economy, you know, and it's great for employment and tax revenue. It's only the private sector, in the end of the day, which creates the tax revenue to support the public sector. So let's get on and do it here in the UK rather than shipping those jobs off overseas.
Yeah, because I was speaking earlier this week to a plumber who rang me up from Bury in Manchester who said that his own receipts in his business are down by a third this year since Labour got in compared to the previous year. So, I mean, that's an awfully big chunk of business that he's not doing. And he says the reason for it is that people are just not willing to spend money because, you know, they're not getting new bathrooms fitted, they're not getting new kitchens fitted, they're not spending the money that they might otherwise be spending because they're not sure what's coming next.
Well, and I think that's exactly the point. You've hit the nail on the head, as has the plumber there in Bury, right? People do not know what's coming next because they cannot trust Rachel Reeves. Labour said that they wouldn't put up national insurance before the election. They've put up national insurance. They've said they get borrowing down. Actually, borrowing is going up. And the amount of debt interest we're paying now, I looked at some of those forecasts, even on their own dodgy numbers. We're forecast to pay, at the moment, I think this year it's going to be £105 billion on debt interest this year. It's going to rise to £130 billion by the end of the Parliament. Bearing in mind that roughly from council tax right across the entire country, we raise around 50 billion a year. So we're paying more in debt interest than double the council tax that is raised in the country on an annual basis already. It's quite clear to me that Rachel Reeves and Labour have totally lost control of the public finances. They've got to get them in order as quickly as possible. Otherwise, I don't know how we're ever going to get out of this mess.
No, I know. And also, the Prime Minister this week has been accused of misleading, at the very least, lying, possibly at worst. He's been accused of saying in a tweet, and I think we've got the tweet, that his tax rate on private schools wasn't actually what they said it was for, which was supposedly to fund 6,500 teachers into the state school system because they wanted to try and dislodge money from the private system and give it to the poorer kids. He's now saying in a tweet that because of the money taken on VAT from private schools, they were able to embark on a building programme.
I mean, it's complete nonsense, mate. You can see that. We already know that from the tax on farmers, they're actually going to be raising less money, right, overall, than the tax, because of other things than farmers not spending money or retreating from investment than they are going to get from the tax itself. I'm absolutely certain that's going to be the impact from this private school tax as well, with the amount of kids having to be forced out of the private sector into the state schools. That's also going to impact on class sizes in a lot of state schools in the country as well. And I think also you're going to see some of those schools close. I mean, that just means you're going to see a loss of revenue from those, the tax of those teachers and those schools would pay as well. So I think right across the board, actually, you're seeing this Labour government making terrible, terrible decisions, and then, as you say, you know, then trying to have smoke and mirrors around what they're doing with the cash and what it was there for in the first place. Another prime example of that from the spending review is actually them saying, oh, we're actually spending more money on defence, yet it turns out, when I was looking into the spending review books the other day, actually what they're doing is they're reallocating all of our MI5 and MI6 budget, the intelligence budget, to defence. So actually they're just saying, oh, there's an extra £5 billion going in, but the truth is, it's all smoke and mirrors. And I'm fed up of this Labour government constantly trying to play these sort of games with the British people. You know, they should be concentrating on economic growth, and the only way you're going to do that is by lowering taxes for people.
Richard Holden, MP, Shadow Paymaster General, thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you. Have a great weekend. Dan Hodges is here, commentator from the Mail on Sunday. Dan, very good morning to you. We're not quite hearing Dan there. Can we get his... Can you try again?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There you go. Yeah, very good. I mean, I can't disagree with much of what I just heard there. And you, I think, probably put it quite well when you said yesterday, Keir Starmer's strategy in response to the collapse of the government's economic strategy is just to lie, not be economical with the truth, but tell outright lies. It's an utterly insane approach, and it will have massive implications in 2 or 3 years. I can't understand what they're doing and why they're doing it.
No, I can't. I mean, obviously we had, I mean, you highlighted it, and that's the tweet I was responding to, this idea that the government has found, I think it's, what is it, raised around an extra 29 billion for housing.
Right.
And the idea that has been found by found from the VAT on private school is obviously just, as I said, it's just a lie.
It's just nonsense, isn't it?
True.
Yeah.
We had, as we saw, as you again cited, we had the IFS analysis of the spending review, in which the IFS basically said they're making up the figures. And of course the biggest lie of all is the one that Rachel Reeves has suddenly been able to start spending all this new cash because they had eradicated the £22 billion black hole they supposedly inherited and stabilised the economy, when obviously she said that on she said that one day, and the next day we found out the economy, had suffered a major contraction. So as they are making it up. But as you've been saying, I've been saying, I don't understand why. If we were sort of a year out, 6 months out from a general election, I could understand the desperation. But we're not. We're 4 years away. We're 3 years away, and I do not understand why the government is just completely panicking in this way, completely U-turning on its entire economic strategy. Its economic strategy is effectively collapsed now, and is running around simply lying and thinking the British people, British business and the financial markets and institutes like the IFS are not going to recognise the lies for what they are.
Exactly right. And I mean, I tried to get this out of John Rentoul, but I failed miserably because he wouldn't really give me an answer. But, who on earth is writing these tweets for Keir Starmer? Because they're getting more ridiculous by the day. I mean, we've now got Jonathan Reynolds, for example, claiming that a US-UK trade deal's imminent. Well, they've been telling us for weeks that they've got a trade deal with the US. And so clearly they haven't got a trade deal with the US because it hasn't been implemented yet. And they haven't agreed it yet. So therefore, they can't keep saying they've got one, can they?
No, I mean, but again, it's just as I said, it's just an example of what their strategy is at the moment. It's just all sorts of any sort of restraint, any sort of message discipline. Obviously, any sort of moral obligation to tell the country the truth has obviously gone out the window. Now, look, I'm not going to sit here and say to you and people watching this programme, are not going to sit there going, oh my God, politicians lie,
right.
And then be shocked about that. But if you remember, again, before the election, Keir Starmer put great store on the fact he was going to be a different sort of Prime Minister. This was going to be a very different sort of government. And that the lies that we saw and came to associate with the Tories, Boris Johnson in particular, but also elements of what Liz Truss said, and also Rishi Sunak said, we were going to get this new sort of politics, and that is obviously for the birds. And as I said, there is going to be a reckoning for this, because these are not half truths. you know, the classic one, the one just sitting there, just coming down the track. You know, Rachel Reeves was very clear. The day after the budget, back in November, she went to the CBI and said, I am not going to come back and raise taxes again. Yeah. I'm not going to do this again. The public sector is going to have to live within its means. We are not going to return to tax and spending. Now, in the November budget, again, the IFS was very clear about this. She's going to have to raise taxes. And as soon as she does that, what slender vestiges of her political and economic credibility are left will be completely destroyed, as will those of Keir Starmer and the government.
Yeah, and at that point, that's when you say things start to get serious for both of them, really, doesn't it? Because I think we said this last week, you think now he will more or less have to fire her, and then he will eventually have to go himself.
Well, she will. I mean, she's going to have to go. I mean, at some point. I mean, she has no credibility left. The question is when. Now, there are some people who are arguing it's just too big a step for him to fire as Chancellor effectively a year after appointing her. There are some other people who say she's quite a useful lightning rod for him and the government. But the point is, as I say, if she is in number 11 Downing Street, and she has to stand. She is the person who has to stand up at the dispatch box at the next budget and announce she is raising taxes. Then it's kind of game over for her, and I think it's effectively game over for the government, because from that point onwards, anything that the government says ever again, people are going to say, yeah, we know that. So that's why I personally think he should move her, whether he will or not. You know, is a separate matter.
Indeed. The other interesting thing this week was his interview with the New Statesman. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, where he talks a bit about his own kind of reticence, his own inability to articulate what he wants to articulate. He kind of more or less gives himself 5 out of 10 for communication skills. You know, I'd give him about 3. But he talks about regretting making that Island of Strangers speech. And I don't know whether he's just doing that as a sop to the left wing of the party, but, you know, at least have the courage of your convictions. If you're going to do it, why stand behind it?
Exactly, but also, you know, I remember writing at the time. I mean, I gave Keir Starmer and the government credit for finally sort of waking up to and addressing the issues that obviously, you know, the country have over concerns. But I did point out at the time that the problem we had was the action wouldn't match the rhetoric, because the rhetoric wasn't actually Keir Starmer's rhetoric. It wasn't his words. They were words obviously drafted for him by advisors that he simply parroted. I mean, again, that's proven to be correct. I mean, but as you say, I don't see the benefit in him sort of disavowing himself in this way. But this is where unfortunately we're gonna go with this government now. I mean, I remember writing years ago, long before he became Prime Minister, how somebody close to Keir Starmer had said that Starmer himself had told them, "I don't really understand politics. I'm not that good at it." And I think we can all see that now. Right. The problem is, though, it's not just a question of him not being good at politics. As we've seen with the mess the government is in on the economy, it's becoming pretty useless at governing as well. Put those two things together, and Labour's got a serious political problem, and so does the country.
Yeah, it really does. Good to speak to you. Thanks very much indeed, Dan. We're out of time. Dan Hodges, commentator of the Mail on Sunday. Pretty gloomy about the prospects for not only Rachel Reeves, but also for Keir Starmer. As he says, you know, I don't know if he will quit, but he's going to be under an awful lot of pressure to do so because of the fact that the government is failing. Economically, it's failing. Socially, it's failing. It's messing the country up in ways that may not be recoverable. Let's get a voice note from Tim on David Bull.
Hi Mike, Tim in Halifax here, enjoying your show on this beautiful morning as I walk my dog. I'm listening to you. I was just listening to stuff about David Bull and people laughing at him for believing in ghosts. Well, I must admit, I think it's ludicrous to believe in ghosts too, but I wonder how many people who are laughing at him believe that there's a little man in the sky that watches over us all the time and rewards us for good deeds and punishes for bad deeds. Because let's face it, there's the same amount of scientific evidence for that as there is for ghosts. So stop sneering at him and let him have his beliefs. Have a good day.
Very well said, Tim. We live in a democracy. You're allowed to believe in anything you want. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? Apart from some things you're not allowed to believe in, and of course Starmer's lot will come after you. But, you know, I think David Bull's appearance on Good Morning Britain, while some people were going, what on earth is he getting stuck into that for? Why is he talking about ghosts? I think actually people who will likely vote reform don't think it's that big of a deal. Certainly the people I've spoken to in Reform don't think it's that big of a deal. I think it's quite entertaining. 23 minutes past 9, we go live to Gatwick Airport. Nick Ellaby's our reporter there. We'll get the latest on what's happening there after that horrific crash in India yesterday.
Obviously, this is a tragedy beyond measure, but it also goes very trends we are seeing in international aviation for there to be basically very, very few crashes,
yes.
let alone...
People think of it as that so many people are scared to fly, but it is actually, mile for mile, time spent travelling, the safest form of travel. There are so many areas where, safety has been improved over the years, which is why, of course, such horrific stories become news.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:26. It is Friday the 13th, of course, and lots of the papers this morning have got the one story on the front page, which is the one dominating story today. This morning, of course, at least 290 people, including 52 Britons, killed in that horrifying Air India crash. The most incredible part of the story, though, in many ways, is that a British man has miraculously survived, the only survivor of a plane crash. He was seated in seat 11A. His name is Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. He lives in Leicester, and he emerged limping from the smouldering wreck of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner yesterday morning. Absolutely incredible. Let's go live now to Gatwick Airport. The plane was leaving India, Ahmedabad Airport. It was due to land at Gatwick last night. Nick Ellaby's there for us for Talk. Nick, very good morning to you. What's the situation at Gatwick? We're hearing that the Indian government is considering grounding Air India's Boeing 787 fleet. We haven't heard anything else on that front. What are you hearing there?
In terms of the planes here, it's very much business as usual at Gatwick here. There are a number of probably concerned passengers, slightly more concerned than usual. I've had a conversation with a number of them who did relay those concerns to me after what's happened. Worth repeating, Mike, that air travel is generally very, very safe. It's this miraculous story of this one man surviving this Air India crash yesterday in Ahmedabad that you know, air investigators and experts say that usually with these things you either get a large number of people surviving or no one at all. To have one man walk away from a crash, which Air India have confirmed 241 people have lost their lives, is really nothing short of a miracle. As you say, that man from Leicester, 40-year-old Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, he's a company director. The sad part of the story of his story is that his brother was sat in the same row but on the other side of the aircraft. He was in 11A. His brother AJ, 30 years old, was sat over the other side in the same row. We understand, well, there's no news, but we understand that he's one of those 241 that also lost their lives. And we've also had an update from the ground in Ahmedabad that confirmed we've had at least 8 people from the ground when that plane hit a doctor's hostel are confirmed to have died. That number may well rise, and the authorities in Ahmedabad have recovered at least 204 bodies from that site, and that includes people from the ground and on the plane as well. But the Boeing 787 airliner that came down has been working operational since 2011, and this is the first crash that particular Dreamliner has had. So you could really, up to now, call its safety record impeccable. We understand some 1 billion passengers have been carried by that plane over 5 million flights. So, you know, this is very much an uncommon occurrence.
It is, absolutely. It's a shocking, absolutely shocking piece of video footage as well. Nick, thanks very much indeed. Nick Ellaby reporting into us there from Gatwick Airport, where, as he says, it's business as usual. We spoke to Nick a little bit earlier in the show, and he was saying that some people had been expressing, nervousness about getting on a plane, as everybody always does after something like this happens. Let's talk to Lisa Minnow, travel editor at The Sun. Lisa, hi, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Awful story, this, and it's a terrible crash and made all the worse, I think, because you can see it basically happening. And how this man survived it, sitting in 11A, is quite an extraordinary story. The Sun obviously have it on their front page as well. What does the airline business do in these kinds of situations? I mean, I was saying to Nick there, the Indian government's considering grounding Air India's Boeing 787 fleet. I'm surprised that Boeing hasn't done that yet.
Well, it wouldn't actually be Boeing who could be doing that. But one thing you would have to say about the aviation industry is they are hugely collaborative. Anything like this, the information sharing will be going globally at any point, because obviously everybody has safety as their #1 priority. Now, an investigation into a crash as serious as this will take probably between 12 to 24 months. And we already know that officials from the UK have flown out, and they will be taking part in that investigation purely because of the number of British people who were involved and who sadly lost their lives in the incident. It is our worst aircraft disaster since 9/11. 67 British people died at 9/11. 52 in this. It's a hugely shocking incident.
Yeah, it really is. And, I mean, what does happen to the travel industry after something like this? Do people kind of recover fairly quickly? I mean, do they say, well, we've got a plane booked for next week, we're just going to get on it? I mean, it does make everybody think of what might happen.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think people will, understandably be nervous, especially when they hear about the Indian government saying they're considering shuttering the fleet for, or temporarily putting the fleet down on the ground. But I mean, in this situation, I think you have to remember just how many planes are in the skies at any one time.
Yeah.
Millions of us are in the air at the moment. And it's just not the kind of thing that would actually sort of grind to a halt. I mean, I think what's more concerning at the moment, of course, is we have these attacks in the Middle East. That has seen large amounts of airspace being closed. And there is definitely a nervousness. We had an Air India plane that made an emergency landing in Thailand yesterday. Or overnight after a bomb threat on board. So that nervousness is definitely going to be part of the coming days. And until we get an answer to actually what happened, that is going to remain, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Because that, as you say, that Israeli-Iran conflict, which is now going on, is bound to affect flights. I flew to Dubai a few weeks ago, and I was staggered to see at one point, as I was following the plane's path, we were flying right between Tehran over there and Baghdad over there. And I thought, crikey, maybe I'll just go back to sleep because, it was, I presume now planes aren't flying that way.
Yeah, so there was quite a lot of diversions overnight for Middle Eastern planes and Asian planes that normally would have been flying over that airspace.
Right.
So a lot of planes either went back to their destination of departure, or they landed in various places across Europe. I think a Heathrow flight to Mumbai landed in Vienna. So we have quite a sort of chaotic situation out there because of that. And of course, in the midst of all of this, we have people actually, just as you say, trying to do their normal lives, get on planes. There's going to be that kind of concern about both the crash and what's happening in the Middle East right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa, thank you very much indeed. Lisa Minnow there, travel editor at The Sun. We were talking earlier about the weather as well as so travel being affected. If you are heading to somewhere like Dubai, or if you're heading somewhere in the southern hemisphere or Thailand or somewhere like that, more than likely the planes are going to be going a different way. Might make the journey longer, not sure. Morning, Mike, says Roger. Water shortage. Britain is an island. Desalination is the way forward. And Michelle says, Mike, there is nothing normal about weather. Where on earth has British weather been classed as normal? Well, it hasn't been normal for a long time. And Sean from Bridlington says, this government has no idea about economics at all. If they keep increasing taxes, eventually the amount of money coming in will actually decrease rather than increase. Dangerous muppets. Well, this is the trouble, because people will find ways to avoid paying tax. People will also pay less tax if they make less money. So, in fact, the government's tax take goes down. It's common sense, but they don't have any. Let's get a voice note from Tony.
Hi mate, great show as usual. Tony from Bradford here, just on holiday at the moment with the missus in Sicily. Beautiful weather, but just dreading coming back to the socialist UK, two-tier Starmer, destroy the economy, Reeves and Ed Miliband scaring people with his singing, you know, like the answer's blowing in the wind. God, you've got clowns running the country. I think we're all doomed. You know, common sense can predict the future, and it's simple. Get rid of these clowns, the socialists, and let's just move ahead with reform when they come into power. Can't wait. Keep the show. Keep it going, buddy. Fantastic.
Tony there on the Labour government, and that's what a clown show it actually is, and so many people are saying it now, and that's the thing. One here from Michael, who says, private school fees. I put 2 children through private school and worked 2 jobs to do it. Luckily this year is the final year of fees. The VAT on fees was never about raising money. It's a smokescreen. It's all about closing down private education to the middle classes. They cannot do it by ordering private schools to close, but they can do it by making the cost too high to afford. That's exactly right, and so many of the schools are actually now closing anyway. Because they can't afford to charge the people the money. They can't. The number of people coming into the schools has gone down. 13,000 kids have actually gone out of the private school system into the state system. And Keir Starmer, who said he was going to supply an extra 6,500 teachers, doesn't appear to have done that either. Who knew that he wouldn't tell the truth and he wouldn't do anything that he promised? Coming up, we're going to talk to Catherine Porter, independent energy consultant. She's not very happy with Ed Miliband. Kemi Badenoch, of course, came out yesterday and said that Miliband needs to end the windfall tax and the ban on new oil licences, because we need to get rid of the mad net zero, the crazy net zero idea, in order to get the country going and growth actually starting. That's what we need. That's all coming next.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:38 and we're nearly over. I mean, the week has come to an incredibly fast end. It's Friday the 13th. Big weekend coming up. Very hot day today, apparently. Net zero still very much on the agenda for this government, despite the spending review, despite the cutbacks on various other secretaries of state and various other departments of state. The energy department goes ramping on and gets more and more money. Kerry Badenoch, though, calling for the windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas to be scrapped. Also calling for renewal of some oil licences. Catherine Porter's here, independent energy consultant. Catherine, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
If only it were true. I mean, if only we could get some oil and gas exploration going, if only Ed Miliband would see sense. But this government seems incredibly fixated on it, doesn't it? I mean, they cut the budgets of so many different departments, and yet they boosted the energy department by something like nearly 8%.
Well, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. They're persisting with this idea of a windfall tax on oil and gas when there aren't any windfall prices anymore. Crude oil prices are down 40% from their peak, but gas prices are down 86% from their peak. This is crazy. They're just not in that territory anymore, that a 78% tax rate is in any way justified. And some analysts are saying that this is going to cost over £20 billion in lost tax income over the remaining life of the North Sea basin, because producers are cutting back on production.
Yeah.
We've already seen 10,000 jobs lost in the region. Rigs are moving out of the region, and producers are just refocusing their efforts on other parts of the world. And all that's doing is driving imports. So now we have to pay more to import the gas. And oil. We've lost control of the production emissions. We have one of the highest environmental production standards in the world, and obviously if we're importing, we don't have any control over that anymore. And of course then you have all the emissions from shipping. It is just a brain dead policy.
Right, exactly. And of course now we've got a situation where the oil produced practically next door to where our oil is going to be sent to us by Norway. So we're sort of capping the wells, if you like, and then we're going to next door and saying, can we have yours? And we'll pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, I do take some issue with Miliband characterising the Norwegians as evil dictators. I think that's something of a niche view. But we do rely on Norway for our oil and gas even more so than oil. And there's absolutely no reason we can't be maximising our own production. It should be a no-brainer. We're not reducing our consumption in any meaningful way. So why not make as much of it ourselves as we can and not have to import it from other people?
Well, absolutely right. And I mean, as far as the oil, I mean, the oil price might, I suppose, go up a bit over the next few days because of what's happening in the Middle East with the Israelis bombing Iran and all the rest of it. But, the general sort of long-term, shall we say, worthlessness of net zero still doesn't seem to have hit these bozos in government, because at the end of the day, solar panels are all very well up to a point. They're talking about building nuclear plants now, and they say because it will be much better in all weathers. Like the weather won't. So they've actually effectively admitted that that renewables don't work when the weather doesn't work.
I know, who knew? And solar power doesn't work at all at night, which still apparently takes some people by surprise. What I'm hearing, though, is quite interesting. So gas prices are coming down, as I mentioned, and by the end of this year, we'll have replaced all of Russian gas with new LNG projects. And although there was some structural tightening that was supporting prices, in the next few years, we should see prices starting to fall back to pre-crisis levels. But I'm hearing stories that actually projects for new wind farms are coming in at much higher prices, that they're pressuring to see the subsidy levels increase significantly. And I think the next subsidy round is really in trouble as a result of this. I struggle to see how Ed Miliband can sign contracts at above £100 a megawatt hour, which I think is what he's going to need to do, when the wholesale price of electricity last year was just £73 a megawatt hour. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because with falling gas prices, those renewable subsidies are looking even more expensive than they were already.
But that's the problem, isn't it? That, at the end of the day, the money's just not going to be there. And if these companies know that the government is so keen to do what they want to do, they'll just sort of hold them to ransom. They'll just double their prices, like all government contractors do.
Well, they will, and because Miliband has announced such high targets, and there's only a finite number of projects participating in the market anyway, and we've seen supply chain costs and financing costs going up significantly. So there's an element where prices have gone up, that's real, but also there's this whole game that they can be playing around extracting as much money as possible. But there are limits to this. I can't see that Ed Miliband is going to be able to sign deals that are materially above the market price of electricity based on gas. His whole narrative about gas being responsible for expensive pricing is already disintegrating, because the average price last year was £10 lower than the price he signed at new offshore wind farms. And so these two things are moving in opposite directions. Gas is coming down and the subsidy levels are going up. I simply don't see how he's going to be able to get that over the line.
No, you do wonder, don't you? I think we've got a little clip of Kemi Badenoch's speech. Let's have a look.
Energy situation. I think we need to look at exactly what the mix is in terms of renewables and gas. We have created a very distorted sort of grid distribution system that actually makes energy more expensive. I'm not against renewables, but we are subsidizing something while closing down gas, which is actually quite efficient. Gas should be part of any sort of transition, so we need to look at what we're doing on that. We need to look at what we're doing in the North Sea. Stopping all these companies from investing there is terrible for our energy security, for example. We need to look at the levies that we're putting on people's bills.
Will we finally see the Conservative Party giving up on net zero? I mean, they're sort of hinting at it, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, earlier in the year, Kemi Badenoch gave a speech in which she said that the Conservatives were abandoning the net zero 2050 target. I don't think she's abandoning the idea of net zero altogether, but I think she's saying that it has to be balanced between the ambition to support the climate, but also the costs that's having and the impact on people's bills and the impact on people's jobs, because higher energy is impacting across the economy. We're seeing a lot of businesses closing, manufacturing, offshoring, and it's annoying that the manufacturing is moving to places with dirtier energy. So there's no overall climate benefit from that. It's just harmful for the UK economy. And so I think the Conservatives are starting to understand this, and hopefully in the next few months we'll see them coming out with more policies and more concrete ideas on how they would address it.
Well, we'll see. We look forward to it. Catherine, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Catherine Porter, independent energy consultant there on the Tory and the possible move to a bit more of a less friendly, shall we say, net zero scenario. We've got a voice note from Lisa, but first, Gary in Spain. Gary, very good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, what can I do for you? You want to talk about Gibraltar?
Yeah, there seems to be some confusion about what's going on there. Don't get me wrong. What I'm going to say, I'm not on Labour's side, and I wouldn't put David Lammy in charge of the cabinet. But the thing is that with Gibraltar, people that fly to go to Gibraltar are not going to come into contact with Spanish officials. It's only if they're going to Spain. So the Gibraltar Airport was originally built to have two ways. So one to go into Gibraltar, the other one to go into Spain.
Right.
So people that are going to Spain will go through that route and then go through passport control for Gibraltar, then Spain, and straight off. If you're going to Gibraltar, you will not come into contact with Spanish officials.
Well, David Lammy seems to be under the impression that you will, because that's what he said yesterday in Parliament.
Yeah, but that is not going to happen.
He says it's going to happen. He basically told MPs a British person stopped by Spanish guards at Gibraltar Airport will have a choice when they're stopped. They can either voluntarily go over to Spain for questioning or be returned to the Gibraltar authorities and returned to the UK.
But if you're going to Gibraltar, you don't have to come into contact with Spain. The way that
No, but you will now. That's the point, isn't it?
Well, it shouldn't work like that.
Yes, but I think that's what they're proposing.
Well, then, I mean, that's totally wrong, and I totally disagree with that.
Right.
But the way that the airport was built is that you've got a section which goes straight off into Spain, which means that you don't have to go into Gibraltar.
Yes, no, I get that.
Use that. Sorry?
I get that that's the way it works at the moment, but I think the point about what David Lammy has negotiated...
it doesn't work like that at the moment. No, it doesn't.
Sorry, I thought you said
like
that's how it works at the moment.
No. The way that the airport was built, the airport was the airport at the moment was built in around 2007.
Right.
And the idea is that if you're going over to Spain, you don't have to go into Gibraltar. You just go straight into Spain.
Yes.
At the time when that was designed and built, the Spanish government reneged on the contract, but the airport is still designed that way.
Right, but so they don't use it, though?
It should work.
Yes, but they don't actually use it that way, though?
No, they haven't, but it's still
So
there
at the moment, Gary, when you fly into Gibraltar, you are seen presumably by British immigration?
Yes, that's right.
And that's what's going to change. So when you now fly into Gibraltar, after they change it, it will be Spanish. That's what we're going to do.
Not if you're going to Gibraltar. If you're going to... No, I'm sorry, Mike.
Well, you've just told me this is how it happens. The way it works now is that when you fly to Gibraltar, despite the fact that you could go straight into Spain, you are still seen by British immigration officials, right? That's the way it works now. Yeah?
Yeah, you fly into Gibraltar, yeah?
Right.
So then when you go through passport control, yeah, you've got Gibraltar passport control, and then you go off, and if you're staying in Gibraltar, that's what you do.
Fine.
If you're going over to Spain, you go to the border between Spain and Gibraltar, and then you go.
And then you see the Spanish, right? But now, because of this new deal, what's going to happen is the first person you'll see when you land, instead of a British immigration officer, it will be a Spanish one. That's what's happening.
It shouldn't be a Spanish one.
I know it shouldn't. That's why we're all annoyed about it. That's why we're doing the story, Gary.
I understand.
Gary, listen.
I understand.
I've got to go.
The reason why you're annoyed, and I totally agree with you.
Good.
But the way that it should work, the way that it's been designed...
No, I know you say. I know the way it should work, but it doesn't work that way. Gary, listen, I've got to go. Appreciate your time. That's one of those conversations you could have forever, isn't it? Just go on and on. Lisa, on diversity.
Morning, Mike. It's Lisa from Canterbury. Do you know what? Every single day I turn the TV on, and obviously on your show too, everything's about diversity, inclusion, all of these terms. I am sick to death of hearing those phrases. There is no diversity in this country. All it is people come to live here and they segregate into their own religious groups. They have no desire at all to integrate at all in anything that we do in a British society. So all this diversion and inclusion, it's an absolute total load of old codswallop, I'm sorry to say. Anyway, sun's out, have a lovely day, bye.
Yeah, taps off, as they say in Scotland. Lisa, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, Lord McKinley.
the flight was leaving the southwesterly runway on the way to Gatwick, and as you said, it got to about 625 feet. Now, normally when these aircraft are getting airborne, normally for sound reasons, they do a very steep climb. Most passengers will know when they get airborne for their holidays, the aircraft go on a steep climb after takeoff up to 1,000 feet or beyond. So this clearly only managed about halfway up there and then crashed about 2 kilometres away from the airfield, so very close. The aircraft would have been at its most vulnerable because it would have been absolutely crammed full of fuel at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:54. This from Joe. Mike, I worked in the North Sea for 30 years paying high rate tax. Now it's over. I've taken a job in Dubai. Tax-free now, so not a penny from me to Starmer. They're destroying the North Sea for nothing. Great show, thank you. Let's get a voice note from JB.
Whatever we may think of the Conservatives and their infighting, Rishi Sunak did warn the country what would happen if Labour got in, and I have to say he's been proved absolutely right.
He has, I'm afraid. We're all paying a lot more tax. Lord McKinley's here, Conservative peer, of course. Lord McKinley, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Been too long.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Kerry Badenoch's been making a pretty good fist of being leader of the Tory party. I think it took her a little while to warm up. She's getting much better at Prime Minister's questions now. She's nailed Starmer a couple of times. She was in the city yesterday talking about what her plans are for the future. And even Quentin Letts of the Daily Mail says, could this mean the first buds of a Tory revival?
Well, I certainly hope so, as a Conservative peer, that's for sure. But yeah, talking about the whole windfall tax issue, and I know you had Catherine Porter on, who is excellent on these issues. I mean, we've had a funny framework of tax. There's been a special position for North Sea oil and gas for some years, and the tax rate's been up and down. It's been sort of different from normal corporation tax, but it's settled in the last few years at 60%. Bad enough, high enough, a rate of tax that no Conservative should be proud of. But we made it even worse, and we put it up to 75%. And I spoke in the Commons against that at the time, on the basis that we're seeing today that you'll see the North Sea diminish. You'll have the tax, not only will they legally be turned off by legislation from the central government, which is exactly what Gerald Ed Miliband is doing, but because of the tax rate, people will try and invest and do their stuff elsewhere. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So if 75% wasn't bad enough for you, it did at least come with some quite generous capital allowances. So if you spent on things, you'd have that as a tax deduction. Labour went even worse from November last year, put the rate up to 78% and restricted capital allowances. So lo and behold, together with the banning of new licenses, the jobs in the North Sea, the tax coming out of the North Sea, the energy security that comes out of the North Sea, all gone, all going abroad, and those petroleum products now being imported. We've seen Grangemouth up in Scotland, a very, very long-standing oil refinery. So on this current trajectory, we will be importing within a few years refined diesel and petrol that has been refined elsewhere. Now, if you're telling me that equates to energy security, then I'm the jolly green giant. But what we're seeing from Kemi, I think, is some reality. And that is often the benefit of opposition, much as I don't like opposition. You have the time to reflect on policies. You have the time to say, do you know what? We got some of these policies wholly and absolutely wrong. And my advice, and as you may know, I was the chairman of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group in Parliament, still am, but I'm also the director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. We need to offer governments a way out of this stupidity that they've got themselves into. And there are three on this. One is to say, well, CO2, if that's the real baddie in life, It's a global thing. There isn't a barrier around the UK, and then whatever we do uniquely stays in the UK. Of course not. CO2 emitted in China is into the the same global ecosphere. So importing stuff from China on the back of cheap coal does not actually help anything. It actually makes everything far worse, and you get no tax out of it. So we need to say to the world, you know what, we're going to just hold fire for a bit and let you lot catch up, because we've got far too ahead of ourselves. We're going through a deindustrialization that you lot aren't. And once you catch up on the level of renewables that we've got ourselves to, then we can join the train together as a global bandwagon.
Yeah.
The second one is, instead of spending £30 billion a year with Norway for gas and oil, instead of spending another 10 billion, these are broad terms, with Qatar, another 10 billion with the US and a few billions elsewhere. I mean, could you believe we actually import some LNG from as far away as Australia? Now, tell me that that's CO2 efficient, and again, I'll tell you I'm the jolly green giant. But anyway, we're spending 50 billion of, so a lot of balance payments, which we've always struggled with in the UK, zero jobs, zero tax.